Let's see. I'd like to call this meeting to order. This is the March 13th version of the Fountain Hills Planning and Zoning Commission. If you would all please rise with us for the Pledge of Allegiance in a moment of silence. Thank you. All right, Paula, roll call, please.
Commissioner Corey,
Here.
Commissioner DePaul,
Here.
Commissioner Dempster,
Here.
Commissioner Kovacevic,
Here.
Commissioner Watts,
Here.
Vice Chairman Schlossberg,
Here.
Chairman Gray.
Here, thank you, Paula. Agenda item 3, call to the public. Paula, do we have any call to the public speaker cards?
Yes, Chairman, there are 3.
Thank you very much. Let's go ahead and call them up.
In order, first speaker is Crystal Kavanaugh, Jane Bell, and Larry Myers.
Good evening. September 24th, 2022, a property located at 16927 East Saguaro, behind the Denny's area near the Old Fire Rock community, was marketed by Grace CRE as an amazing office space or potential wellness rehab property in the heart of Fountain Hills. Some of us were concerned enough with that statement that we actually mentioned it at a town council. 1 month later, this sold for $1 million to Angel Heart Health Services. A warranty deed was not recorded, but there is a contract of conveyance between the seller and the 2 principals of Angel Heart Health Services. Shouldn't a realtor know what the zoning is before marketing a non-conforming use? Shouldn't a purchaser check out zoning restrictions? This property is zoned here in Fountain Hills as C-O, commercial office. We have an ordinance on the books describing what types of businesses can operate in this zone. It is defined quite specifically. It's meant for well-designed, attractive businesses that meet criteria for professional or semi-professional offices that transition between other commercial land uses and residential neighborhoods in the area. The ordinance clearly lists business types that conform, such as accountants, doctors, dentists, chiropractors, engineers, private detectives, lawyers, and financial institutions. The only type of counseling services allowed is for marital counseling. An MPI number tells people who you are and what you do. Angel Heart Health Services has a taxonomy provider number associated with being an addiction or substance use disorder counselor. Their state license is for behavioral health, and the 2 principals are listed as behavioral analysts. Behavioral health services do not conform to this zoning. We have an ordinance clearly stating where behavioral health can occur, and it can't occur in C-O. Apparently, this business has not yet officially opened. They have not yet applied for a business license in Fountain Hills. If the future application states counseling services, it is imperative that town staff know what counseling services will be provided. Substance abuse and addiction services are non-conforming and should not be approved. If anyone is currently unaware of the behavioral health licensing category for this business, they need to do some research. Going directly to the Angel Heart Health Services website gives a description of their services and lists medical associates. Medical personnel are not usually needed for marital counseling. We have land use restrictions and zoning ordinances for a reason. Just as with Mountainside, citizens need to be able to count on zoning being enforced, with staff making the decisions in the best interest of our community. Thank you.
Folks, we're going to try and keep it moving tonight, so if we could refrain from the applause.
Chairman and Commissioners, I am here tonight asking for your help in denying a business permit to operate by the Angel Heart Health Services. newly located at 16927 East Saguaro Boulevard. This parcel is zoned C-0 and is very specific in its uses for behavioral health, is not one. Angel Heart is a behavioral health services by our own website, state licensing, MPI, and is not marriage counseling. Their centers are responsible for assuring the delivery of community-based mental health, mental retardation, substance abuse, and/or behavioral health. The services to individuals and their disabilities. Drug treatment and behavioral health terms are often used interchangeably in both businesses to address drug addiction. According to the State Board of Behavioral Health Examiners of Arizona, there is a Title 32, Chapter 33 Behavioral Health Professions. Under 32-3251, Number 7 under definitions, the practice of marriage and family therapy means the professional application of family systems, theories, principles, and techniques to treat interpersonal relation issues. Under 10, practice of substance abuse counseling means and includes the use of psychotherapy for the purpose of evaluation, diagnosis, and treatment. Angel Heart Services are substance abuse treatment businesses as per their own website. And the eyes of the state of Arizona licensing, no business license should be granted for this use in this commercial zoning on C-0. Please make sure to uphold the ordinance governing land use as written by the town ordinance. I want to show you this, and I think it makes a statement on it. Angel Heart Services is a mental health clinic. Now, we're familiar with Fountain Hills Recovery Center, and beside it, it's a mental health treatment. These words are used interchangeably. You've got to be astute to it. If it quacks like a duck, it is a duck. Thank you.
Chair, Commissioners, not to belabor the point, I handed you a handout that's only half of what there is. Ran out of paper, ran out of ink. I will email it. So as was stated, this parcel is C-0. There's a list of things that can be done in C-0. By our own standards, behavioral health is not a use in C-0. The NPI on all of Angel Heart's services facilities throughout the valley, of which there are many, their NPI is behavioral substance abuse. Their taxonomy is substance abuse counselor. That's the facility. The principals are behavioral analysts by their own NPI number. So everyone concerned with this particular business, which is applying or has applied for a business license to operate in Fountain Hills in the C-0 office district, is connected with behavioral health. And we've just gone through 2 years where this commission and the council delineated behavioral health from the definition of hospital so that they couldn't exist in C-1. Why would it exist in a lower zoning, C-0, be allowed to exist there, and a beautifully written ordinance for where it actually can exist was just forwarded on from this body to the council, passed with one minor change, and that's not C-0, that's C-2, C-3, if all of the parameters can be met. One more item to bring to your attention. The state, their license with the state, is for behavioral health. And there's 7 citations from the Tempe facility, and I'm not mentioning the citations because they have them. Their citations are for abuses of behavioral health. So, as my colleague Ms. Bell said, sounds like a duck. It's quacking like a duck. Pretty sure it is a duck. It's already purchased the building. Sorry, you should know what your zoning is. And they're going to be applying for a business license. So I am only here to bring this to this body's attention. I'm here to bring it to staff's attention. And we're, as a group of citizens, we're not going to allow it. This is an ordinance that's written, it's on the books, it hasn't even been changed in I don't know how many years. C-O's been there for a long time. And this use is not a C-O use. I don't care the word counseling of a lot of different things. So if they're not a marriage counselor, they're not in C-O as far as we're concerned. Thank you very much.
Any more speaker cards?
Yes, Chairman. Bob Strasser.
Thank God they spoke before me, because I could be even briefer. They said a lot of the things that I was going to get into, but when we purchased our house in 2018 in Fountain Hills, one of the areas that I did diligent research on was zoning, schools, things like that, to decide that I was going to live here. What I'm seeing is the trend that other communities are not getting having these sorts of organizations frequenting them. Instead, it's basically it's a cash-making operation. The organizations that start, they get reimbursed a large amount of money. It's the whole purpose of it really isn't drug rehab, isn't really counseling. It's about the bucks that they get for every patient that they take in. And I agree with Larry, I agree with Jane, and for crying out loud, I don't want to see Fountain Hills become known as the rehab/rehabilitation capital of Arizona. That concerns me. And, you know, if I would have known some of these things in 18, I probably would have had to weigh them to decide to take up permanent residence here. I had lived 15 years before that in a condo, which we owned. But when we decided to make the big move and get the house, that was definitely on the list. So I would encourage you, as Larry said, leave the zoning the way it is, 0, and use it according to the use that prior commissioners, prior village or town boards have designated the 0 as, let's not change it, let's leave it the way it is. I thank you.
No. Okay. That concludes the call to the public. We will move on to agenda item number 5, a public hearing and consideration of possible action to rezone the 3.1 acres of the 6.3 acre property from R110, single-family residential, to R3, and the rezoning of 3.2 acres of the same property from R4 multifamily to R3 multifamily. Farhad, your presentation, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, and the public. As most of you well know, this item was continued from the January 9th meeting. 2 months later, here we are revisiting the case. And just as a brief refresher, I've prepared 4 slides, and also I'll introduce the modified tentative development plan. But in summary, as you mentioned, Mr. Chairman, this is a rezone proposal for a 6.3 acre property from the R110 single-family zoning district to the R4 multifamily zoning district, or rather, and the R4 multifamily zoning district to the R3. The property, the subject property is 6.3 acres. Now, although not depicted here, the northern half of the property is zoned R110, and the southern half is currently zoned R4. The applicant plans on replatting the 6.3 acre property because it does currently consist of two different parcels, assuming the proposed rezone is approved. So the zone change request, as I mentioned, I won't go over the first three bullets here, but the planned use is a proposal for an 80-unit multifamily development consisting of 4 buildings. Each building is 3 stories, including tuck-under garages. There will be a combination of garage and surface parking, which you'll see in the modified, or rather both site plans. And there are 2 vehicular access points proposed off of Mountainside Drive. This was the tentative development plan that the applicant came forward with at the January 9th meeting. As you can see, the 4 buildings that I discussed earlier briefly, they consist of 80 units. Building 3, as you can see there, was originally proposed to be 30 feet from the property line facing Mountainside Drive. And as I mentioned, there are 2 access points originally proposed to be full ingress-egress access. The applicant recently has come forth with a modified development plan. And as you can see, buildings 3 and 4, particularly the south side, and by the way, north is, actually I do have the north arrow right there for reference, but I guess you could say the lower left-hand quarter of buildings 3 and 4 have been shifted a little bit towards the east in such a way where building 3 is now about 90 feet from Mountainside Drive. And building 4 is approximately parallel to that. This is to address some of the commission and public's concerns about the prominence of some of these buildings from the Lost Hills neighborhood to directly to the west. Buildings 1 and 2, due to some design considerations, particularly with the topography, the applicant has decided to keep those in place as they were originally. The other difference being that although the same 2 access points are the same alignment as they were before, the applicant is proposing that the south driveway provide only limited access for emergency vehicles and solid waste pickup. And that would include a gate with a Knox box should any of those vehicles need to access the development. In place of where building 3 once stood in its original orientation, the applicant has provided additional or is proposing additional landscaping. Like I said, I was keeping my comments brief. The applicant also actually has a presentation to present before you today as well, in which he will discuss these modifications more briefly. But I will be happy to answer any questions before I hand it over to the applicant.
Commissioners, preliminary questions for Farhad? Commissioner DePauw?
Yeah, Farhad, I'm looking at this drawing and don't see any indication or anything that addresses the drainage that is existing now on the property. Is there anything there that we don't see, or?
Chairman Commissioner DePauw. So currently it is sloped towards the east, so the natural drainage drains into this wash right here to the far east. And so the applicant does have has considered tentatively what that drainage plan would look like, and he can discuss it in more detail But for the most part, the applicant does not, doesn't have any plans to disrupt any of the natural flows. They will be redirected, but they will still drain into the wash.
Okay, is it Sandero's development? Do they own any other developments here in town?
None that I'm aware of, Commissioner.
None here in town?
None that I'm aware of, not in here in Fountain Hills.
Okay. All right, I'll hold. Right.
Commissioner Corey?
Yeah, thanks. Farhad, could you just jump back to the first design? We don't have that in the deck here, so I wanted to just get the visual. Okay, so those buildings were turned and pushed down the hill a little bit, building 3 and 4. I see. Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Watts?
Farhad, for a point of clarification, by right, buildings 1 and 2 could be constructed and probably a portion of building 3 without or closer to Morningside, and they could be more dense. So from a practical standpoint, we're really talking about building 4 more than anything else. That's where the rezoning has to take place to accommodate and go from single-family resident. And in that case, the C4 zoning, or I'm sorry, the R4 zoning, can you tell me what the minimum and maximum building envelope are for those areas? I'm trying to get a sense of how many residents could be in that area. Would it be as congested as having building 4? Would it be worse? So,
Right, Mr. Chairman, Commissioner, I don't have the minimum building setback standards before me, but when comparing R3 and R4, the setback from mountainside in both cases is 30 feet. But as far as the setback standards, I'd have to refer to the table, and I can do that to describe the building envelope required for the zoning district.
so what I'm getting at is that in the single-family zoning, that R4, even though theoretically you can take the 3 acres and you can do the math and say I can get 13 residences in there, the practicality of that's not going to happen.
That's correct. Yes.
So most likely it's going to be closer to somewhere 7 or 8, depending upon a lot of factors. So again, going to building 4, we're talking about an increase in density in that building as opposed to the single-family residence, but the disruption is going to be equal. And my concern really is that building 1, 2, and 3, if we can't come to some sort of terms, we could end up with a kind of a mess. It could be pulled closer to mountainside, the elevations could change, and I'm trying to make sense out of why to approve it, to move forward, to support it, and try to make sure that we don't get something that we didn't intend to get in the first place and get something worse than the product that's being suggested. That's more of a statement. Sorry about that, Farhad.
No, quite all right. Point well taken.
Farhad, and just one more. In last month's hearing, we did talk a little bit about trying to find a way to, I think we used the word parlay on the church's entrance off of Palisades. I assume that was explored between developer and staff and considered prohibitive?
Correct, Mr. Chairman. There were a number of considerations with regards to the drainage and the engineering, and some rather large culverts would be required if that were to occur.
Okay. And then do you have, I think last month we had a civil plan in the packet. Do we have that today? Or is that in the developer's presentation?
Maybe, but yeah, I did not include a grading and drainage plan with the recent presentation.
Okay. Commissioners, other questions of Farhad? Commissioner Kovacevic?
east end, there's a easement along the east end of the property, is that correct?
Correct.
And it runs, and is it for drainage, is it specifically a drainage easement?
Correct, there is a drainage easement encompassing that wash.
And that easement's not being modified?
There's no plans to modify that easement.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Farhad, let's have the developer's presentation, and then we'll go to the public hearing.
Okay, I'll pull up his presentation here before I leave the podium.
Good evening, Chairman Gray, Commissioners. For your records, my name is Mike Merowitz with the law firm of Snell and Wilmer at 1 East Washington Street in Phoenix. And I represent Senderos, who is the developer of this project. And with me here in attendance are a number of other representatives from the development team. One of the things that I love about my job as a zoning attorney is I get to work on a lot of different development projects and zoning cases in different cities, different towns, and different counties. And as I shared at the last hearing in January, this is one of the most unique cases that I've ever been a part of. And in fact, it involves things that I've never been a part of. This is a situation where a developer, in order to build a better designed project, is requesting to rezone a property that results in a downzone of half the property so that less units can be built on the property today, so that the open space that could be provided today is significantly increased, and so that the traffic that could be generated on this property today is also lessened. Those are very rare things, but it's the type of development that you expect to see in Fountain Hills. And as you'll see as I go through my presentation, the benefit of approving this zoning application when compared to leaving the zoning in place are exactly those things, that now we get much more open space than a by right development, we have reduced traffic, and we get a much better project design that lowers the buildings, that utilizes the slope so we can lower them down the hill, that orients them in a way so that when viewed from the single-family homes to our west, it's not as impactful to views. And I'll show that as I go through the presentation. As Farhad had noted, over the last 2 months, we spent a lot of time with the help from city staff on working on design changes so that we could address some of the comments and feedback that we received at the last hearing. And I'll go through those in a little bit more detail in this presentation. But before I do that, I want to give just a little bit of background information to supplement Farhad's presentation. This is an aerial context map of the property and the surrounding area, and you can see the property is highlighted in yellow there, and it's located at the southeast corner of Palisades and Mountainside Drive. And for those of you that know this area well, you know that this property slopes significantly to the east. And it also follows a very common land use and zoning pattern where at the corner of your intersection, as you go down the hill at Fountain Hills Boulevard and Palisades, you have your commercial land uses. And then as you move your way west up the hill past Fountain Hills Boulevard, you have your multifamily land uses. Directly adjacent to our property are the Four Peaks condominiums. And then as you move up the hill on our property to the west across Mountainside Drive, that's where you have your single-family homes. So our property very much sits as the land use, part of the land use transition from commercial, multifamily, then to single-family residences. Here's a closer-up image of the property. It's a little bit over 6 acres in size, and as Farhad had explained, it's currently 2 parcels today, with a north parcel that's right along Palisades Boulevard, and that one's zoned R110, and then the south parcel, which is also a little over 3 acres in size, that's zoned R4. You can't see it too well on this slide, but again, as Farhad had mentioned, this property has a very significant slope. And in fact, there is a 60-foot drop from Mountainside Drive to our west down to the east. That's a 60-foot drop, which presents significant design challenges. But as explained in January, it also provides us an opportunity because one of the benefits about proving this rezoning application compared to a by right development is that it gives us more space so we can spread the buildings out and lower them down the hill and utilize the slope so that way we're protecting and preserving the views of the single-family homes that are to our west. So as I mentioned, the zoning for the south parcel is zoned R4. And what that means is R4 is the town's multifamily zoning district. And under its existing zoning standards, you could build that property today legally by right with 70 multifamily units. And you could do that without any zoning change, meaning that development could happen without any review by the Planning Commission or by the City Council. So you would just need to comply with the minimum development standards. And in fact, when Senderos first approached us, the initial intent was, well, let's just develop that property to the south. That property is already rezoned, or is already zoned for multifamily, so let's build 70 multifamily units on that property. And we showed you at the last hearing of what that development would look like through that conceptual site plan. But there are a number of problems with that development that, while you could do it, makes it not a very great development that certainly isn't compatible with the area or consistent with the type of high-quality development that you expect to see in Fountain Hills. For starters, because it's a small property, you would have to cram your buildings very close together, and because of that, you'd have to locate your buildings up the hill closer to Mountainside Drive, and what that does is it causes the buildings to sit up higher on the slope so that when viewed from the single-family homes to our west, the buildings are sitting much higher and blocking views. Nice thing about our development proposal is we can move them down, and I'll explain that in a bit. The other problem that you have is because it's not a large property and you're putting your 3 buildings in there for your 70 units, you don't have a lot of open space. Our rezoning proposal, by incorporating that property to the north, results in 66% open space. That is an incredibly high number of open space, and we're able to do that because with our rezoning proposal, it doubles the size of our property, and we're only adding 10 additional units. The last problem with a by right development on the R4 parcel is that you don't have a lot of frontage there along Mountainside Drive, and so you just have the one access point to the south, and so all your traffic from 70 units is coming in and out on that southern driveway on Mountainside Drive, which causes a number of problems, and why we've restricted that access now for only emergencies and also for solid waste collection. So the reason we are here before you today is so that we can build a much better designed development by incorporating the north parcel. That north parcel is zoned R110, which means that you could build single-family homes on that property today. And what we are proposing to do is, rather than simply developing that property to the north with 70 units, we're proposing to double the size of the property by incorporating that property to the north, so that will rezone the R110 piece to R3, and then downzone the R4 piece to R3, so we can build a much better design development that now looks like this. As you can see, this development provides 80 dwelling units spread out through 4 buildings. And it solves a number of the challenges that you would have if you just built that property to the south with your 70 dwelling units. The first is, as you can see, is that we're able to now spread the buildings out significantly, and we can lower them down the hill and utilize a slope to angle the buildings, so that way now the buildings are sitting much lower than they would be sitting up higher on Mountainside Drive. And so that's doing a really good job now of respecting the views of the single-family homes to the west. The other thing is, now that we have more property and we're only adding 10 additional units, you can see just how much open space we're providing. This site plan provides 66% open space, and one of the reasons that we're able to do that is that now that we have this additional site area, there is a large portion of the property that we're not touching. So wrapping around our property to the east and to the north is the wash, and also where the drainage easement is located. This development does not touch the limits of that drainage easement or that wash at all. It leaves it completely untouched, which is allowing us to provide this development that leaves that wash in its natural environment and will really be a nice natural feature, and again, provides the type of open space that you expect to see in Fountain Hills. The other thing is, because we're only 80 dwelling units compared to a development that would be 70 units to the south and then single-family homes to the north, is that we're really reducing the traffic, because we're developing less units than what you could probably, than you could develop there by right. Or very close to the amount. And we can go through some of those numbers that our traffic engineer put together as well. As I mentioned, over the last 2 months, we listened to the feedback and comments that we received in January and worked very hard with the help from city staff on design changes that best address or does its very best to address the comments that we received. And this site plan provides an overlay so you can see exactly the changes that we made. So as Farhad explained, we've first taken building 4 and we've dropped it down the hill to the east, so that way now it's sitting at the edge of the drainage easement line. And then we've taken building 3, we've dropped it as well, and we've dropped the southwest corner of the building an additional 60 feet. And that does a number of things. It now leaves 90 feet of separation between our building, between the corner of that building and our west property line, which allows us to provide a lot more landscaping and open space that's now separating our building from Mountainside Drive. So that way neighbors, rather than looking at a building pushed up against the street, have a lot of landscape and open space that is separating our building from their home. The other thing it does is, because we're now moving it down the hill, is it drops the height of the building. That building 3 now only sits 8 feet above the finished floor elevation of the single-family homes to the west of Mountainside Drive. 8 feet is less than your standard typical single-family home, and we've been able to accomplish that because of the creative way that we've been able to utilize the slope and drop this building. The other big thing that we've done, as Farhad had noted, is that we've restricted that southern driveway to now emergency ingress and egress, and then solid waste collection, so that a garbage truck could get in there and collect trash. And that resolves a number of concerns that we had heard. The very first was, because this property sits on the slope, there was a concern that our residents using that southern driveway would be angled upwards and would be flashing headlights into the single-family homes that are to the west of Mountainside Drive. Now, by preventing residents from using that access, that is no longer a concern. The other thing it does is, again, this is a very unique property, and a lot of design considerations have to go into it, and our team has spent a lot of time to making sure that we're developing an appropriate development. But Mountainside Drive undulates, and the high point of Mountainside Drive is at Ponderosa Drive, at least as far as the frontage of our property, and that creates a little bit of an unsafe condition, is a concern that we had heard, where traffic that is coming down Mountainside Drive to the south, when they get over that hill, it creates a little bit of a blind spot where there's a dangerous condition if you have all of our traffic on that southern driveway. The nice thing is now about restricting this driveway is all of our traffic will now be on that northern driveway that's now directing our traffic closer to that intersection. These are examples of how this development, because we are going through the zoning process, we've been able to listen to the concerns and comments and come up with a design that seeks to be a solution to some of these issues. The other thing that we've done is we've worked with city staff to propose stipulations to be approved alongside our rezoning application. And the intent of these stipulations is to ensure that the development of this property is developed exactly or in conformance with the way that we are proposing, but also for the development to be a solution to some of the issues that have been raised. And so I want to go through these quickly. Stipulations 1 through 7 were all included in the staff report that was provided to you, so the language is identical. And then we've added a new stipulation 8, which I'll describe. But to go through it quickly, stipulation number 1 requires general conformance to our site plan. And then subsections A through E identify specific items in the site plan that need to be complied with, including limiting the development to 4 buildings, requiring buildings 1 and 2 to be angled away from Mountainside Drive, requiring building 3 to be dropped a minimum of 70 feet from Mountainside Drive. So examples of items in the site plan that we've incorporated in order to be respectful of the neighboring properties will now be required for this property. Stipulation number 2 requires general conformance with our elevations. One of the things that we've done in terms of the design to respect the views of the neighboring homes is that we've provided a flat roof with no mechanical equipment on the roof. And so you'll see in subsections A and B, that requires us to not allow mechanical equipment on the roof. Stipulation number 3 requires us to provide a minimum of 60% open space. Stipulation number 4 requires the development to be limited to a maximum of 80 dwelling units. Number 5 requires us to make that restriction to the south driveway, so it's only used for emergencies and solid waste collection. And then 6, 7, and 8 are examples of ways that this development can be a solution to some of the existing problems that exist on Mountainside Drive. So stipulation number 6 requires the developer to work with the town's traffic engineer to install improvements such as no parking signs or striping to restrict parking on Mountainside Drive, which was one of the concerns that we had heard from residents. And then stipulation number 7 requires the developer to impose and enforce no parking restrictions, and that would take the form of the lease agreement with future residents that live in the community that would prevent them from parking there. And then we've added the 8th one, and the reason we bolded that is because that is a new stipulation that we have added, which was added after the staff report was published, and it requires the developer to install speed bumps or speed humps on Mountainside Drive, because one of the concerns that we heard is that with Mountainside Drive, even though there are stop signs there, there is a little bit of an issue where people are driving above the speed limit or even running that stop line, and so or that stop sign, and so having these speed bumps or speed humps will help to address that issue. Before I conclude, I want to cover this slide. Neighborhood outreach is an incredibly important component of any development project. And this development team has spent countless hours going around door to door with the individual neighbors to show them this development proposal, address any comments or questions that they have. And this slide summarizes the support that we've received for the proposal. So listed on the slide are 58 letters of support from the property owners in green that are identified by the marker there, and those 58 support letters were all provided with your case packet today. Then we have 41 individuals who have asked us to label them as verbal support because for one reason or another did not want their support signed in a letter that was added then to a public case file. And then we have 130 that are identified in yellow who have asked us to list them as neutral support, meaning they didn't have any comments or questions about the development. And so this is to show just how much work and community involvement that this development team has done. And the reason that we're able to do this is, again, because we're going through this rezoning process. So rather than the by right development that could be 70 units on the south parcel with no control over where the buildings are located, they would just need to meet the minimum building setback standards, and then having a development to the north that would likely be a single-family development. With us, we get a design that not only gets to, again, reduce the density, reduce traffic, significantly increase open space, and work on design components by angling the building to better respect views, but it also gets to be solutions. And so with that, we respectfully request your recommendation of approval subject to the stipulations that we've proposed. Although before I conclude, Chairman Gray, if it's okay, before questions, I would like to bring up the developer, Ron Cutler, to say a few words, if that's okay.
Sure thing.
Chairman Gray, Commissioners, I represent the developer, Senderos, for this application. I just want to give a little bit of background and history with Senderos. Senderos is a group of investors that have invested substantially in Arizona. I've been involved with them for over 15 years. They've done some really nice developments around town. Going back a little bit further, I was actually involved in the development and the marketing sale of Thunder Ridge in Fountain Hills. I know Commissioner DePaul, you asked about if the developer owns any properties here. That was a for sale community. So we developed that and it was sold as condominiums, as well as a couple other developments I was involved in before that were Majestic Point and Sunflower Villas in town as well. I just wanted to make a point and make it clear that the developer, the people that I represent, they're very, they understand the concerns of the neighbors. They take them seriously, and they want a development that the community could be proud of. That's their modus operandi. That's how they've always operated. That's how we've developed in the past. If you look at the past projects, the one that we just completed in South Phoenix that abuts South Mountain called Senderos at South Mountain, gives you a really good idea of the kind of development that we like to put our name to, which is a quality, high-end development. And to that point, I want to also emphasize that when we purchased the property to the south here, which we currently own, there was a lot of time and effort put into the design of that property, even before it came before the planning department here, where we did what we could, everything that we could to be considerate of the neighbors, dropping the building down the hillside. We understand that Fountain Hills is a community built upon views. Everybody in town is really cognizant of views and wanting their homes to have good views, and it's an important aspect of owning it and living in Fountain Hills. So that was one consideration that we put a lot of emphasis on, was what can we do with the property to try and reduce that impact on the neighboring homes to the west, provide a development that reduces the impact and maintains as much of those views as possible to those neighbors. The additional things that we've done in the design of the project, again, we're here to look for solutions to problems that the neighbors that have come up with, a lot dealing with traffic-related issues and issues of the views and things like that. We've put a lot of effort into the design, both initially and after we've heard comments from the neighborhood outreach and at the last Planning Commission meeting to addressing those concerns. And we're here to be part of the solution and offer up solutions to those concerns to be a good neighbor and to be a benefit to the community. So I just wanted to share that with you. That's all I have for you today.
Thank you. Commissioners, any questions for the applicant before we open the public hearing? Commissioner Schlossberg.
Last time I asked you about the elevation and line of sight from some of the homes across Mountainside, and you had some data, and now since you've lowered those buildings, specifically what I'm looking for is the same data you had, which I don't see in my packet, and then also, is there like an artist's rendering of what this project will look like? I saw the picture you had up there, which I don't think is accurate, but an artist's rendering of what the project's going to look like from all points on Mountainside, like from street level.
Chairman Gray, Commissioner Schlossberg, great questions. So first, as far as your question towards the sightline exhibits, so that's shown here, and these have been updated, particularly with respect to Building 3, now that they've been reoriented. So what this exhibit is showing is that from across Mountainside Drive, you can see that line of sight that's highlighted in yellow over Building 3, what that would look like from the finished floor elevation. And it's sitting exactly 8 feet above the finished floor elevation. Previously at the hearing in January, that building was sitting 11.5 feet above the finished floor elevation, so it's been a drop of 3.5 feet. At the bottom of the screen is another sightline exhibit that was prepared over building number 1. And that one, because of, again, the slope of the property, building number 1 from the finished floor elevation across Mountainside Drive there is sitting just 1 foot above the finished floor. So that one you can see directly over the top of the development. As for the question about the renderings of what the project looks like from the street, we do have project renderings that I want to show here. This is probably the best example, although I will tell you this is a character rendering what it will look like. It's not actually showing you, if you're standing right there on Mountainside, what it would look like. It's more of a bird's eye perspective. But this gives you a sense of the architecture and what the development would look like. But it's a sightline exhibits that do a better job of showing seen over the building.
Okay, and that's the pool area in between the buildings 1 and 2 is what I'm looking at here?
Chairman Gray, Commissioner Schlossberg, yes, that's correct.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Commissioner Watts.
I think last time I asked the question about the survey. There's no red dots that would say I'm vehemently opposed. Where are they?
Chairman Gray, Commissioner Watts, yes, so the intent of that neighborhood outreach slide was to show the support that we've received for this project. We, of course, completely acknowledge that you'll hear from individuals today that are concerned about a development on that property. But what we wanted to show is how much outreach that we did, and that there are individuals here today that are supportive of the project, and in fact, some 58 that have signed support letters that we've added to the case file. But to your point, Commissioner Watts, you're correct. We didn't survey exactly all those who are opposed to the project.
But if you did 300 surveys, and I'm just picking a number, and you've represented, say, 150, how many were negative?
The Chairman Gray, Commissioner Watts, I don't have the exact number for you of negative, but I can tell you that I do believe when you add the neutral and verbal support and those who've actually written a support letter, that there is more support here. But the important point is a lot of the concerns that you've heard from those in opposed are about any development on this property or a multifamily development on this property. But this property can already be developed with a multifamily development that is far worse for a lot of the concerns or reasons that individuals are opposed to the project.
So looking at the rendering, though, I think you would have been benefited if you'd moved the photo more to the right to see Four Peaks, which you don't show right here. So it is obstructing. What I'd like to know is, along the lines of what Commissioner Schlossberg said, is if I shot a laser out of my family room on one of the houses on the side of the hill, and I had a laser line on the top of the building, how much distance between the two, or does the laser coming out of the window of the residence on the highest point on the mountainside impact the building?
Chairman Gray, Commissioner Watts, so great question. The sightline exhibits that we provided are measured from the finished floor of those neighboring homes. So of course a window is going to sit up a little bit higher, and so we haven't done an exact sightline exhibit measuring from the window, but I can tell you building 1 sitting just 1 foot above the finished floor elevation means that laser would go right over the top. Building 3, that's the other one on the north parcel, sitting 8 feet above the finished floor elevation. That one, if a window was looking at it, there would be some obstruction to the views. But again, the important part is the choice that's in front of the commission is not this development or no development. The development for the property is already approved. Instead, the question is this zoning change with these proposed stipulations that results in this development versus what would happen if this zoning were remained in place. And if the zoning remained in place, a by right development, we had shown the site plan of what developing the south parcel would look like. Those buildings have to be pushed much closer to Mountainside Drive and are going to be far taller. So if you're doing a sightline exhibit, you're getting far more of obstruction to a view that you could build today without any control from the commission or the city council. And so it's certainly a great point and one that we've taken very seriously, and we've done the very best that we can to lower the buildings as much as we can. But of course, we can't make the buildings invisible. But we think we've done a very good job of doing the best we can to respect the views of those properties.
So with respect to the parking along Mountainside, as long as you keep that rolled curb up to the sidewalk, that people will park there. And I frankly don't care what you put there as far as signage or whatnot. My recommendation would be, if we move forward, is that we incorporate the removal of the rolled curb and put a square curb in there that's painted red. And then that's more of a restriction to be able to park along that street. It's much more clear. The other thing I'm really concerned about is the traffic for the ingress and egress. And the traffic, when you make a left-hand turn in particular, is impacted, and we just got done going through line of sight on traffic and what we're able to see, what an impediment to line of sight is, and that corner is a disaster. So can we get your commitment to work with town council, or not town council, town staff, to work and participate in correcting that so that it's compliant with the other line of sight issues that we just got done rectifying, as well as get your support on the curbing removal and replacement with a square curb that would be restrictive for parking?
Chairman Gray, Commissioner Watts, to answer your question, so first, the no parking. And I know we had the opportunity to discuss this. The 2 stipulations that we proposed were to install parking signs and striping, and then also to impose and enforce restrictions on future residents. We certainly did look into, and I think it's a good suggestion, acknowledge the concern when you have a rolled curb, it allows for a vehicle to move up on the sidewalk and park there. We are certainly willing to convert it to a vertical curb. The reason why we didn't propose that is that a vertical curb, of course, doesn't prevent parking. It just acts as a deterrent because now you don't park on the rolled curb. We viewed, in speaking with our traffic engineer, as the stipulations to no parking and striping as actually restricting it. That said, we are happy to install the vertical curb if that is the decision of the Planning Commission would like us to do that, and you have that commitment on the record that we would work with the town's traffic engineer on making that conversion. As to the intersection improvements, I know we also had the opportunity to discuss this one as well. there are two things. We spent a lot of time looking at this intersection. And of course, this intersection is an issue. As part of our community outreach, we heard from a lot of neighbors that it's an issue that exists now. Currently, there's not a lot of visibility at that intersection when you're making a left. And so a lot of people don't make the left. They refuse to do it. There are two potential things that we could do that we've discussed with town staff. The very first is you could restrict that intersection to right in, right out only. And the way that you do that is you would provide a pork chop at the intersection, and you'd have to extend the median along within Palisades, so that way someone couldn't make a left into it, and you couldn't make the left out. We are happy to make that improvement. That said, when you offer a solution like that, there are some residents that would be happy to see it, and then there will be others who live in the area that would be very upset to no longer be able to make that left. And so we are happy if that's the decision from the Planning Commission, that they would like to see the developer restrict that access to right in, right out only and extend the median, then we'd be very happy to see that stipulation. But of course, we didn't want to make that unilateral decision ourselves. As the other thing that you could do is, rather than restricting it to right in, right out, is that the property to, let's see if I have a better aerial here that can show it. The property that's directly north of that north parcel that's on R110 is just open space. And that is owned by the town of Fountain Hills, owns most of that property. And for everyone who's driving at the intersection knows is that your line of sight is really cut off at that intersection because there's some berms and then there's the signage there. One thing that we are certainly willing to do, and you have our commitment on the record, is to work with the town on receiving permission so that we can make improvements and essentially shave that down, so that way we improve the line of sight there. Again, we can't make that decision ourselves because it's not our property, it's the town's property, but as Ron had noted, our intent here is to be good neighbors and to look for ways that we can benefit the community. So that is another one that we are happy to commit to work with the town on the improvements to that intersection, so that way we can improve the line of sight.
Thank you.
Commissioner Corey?
Yeah, just one comment. Hi, Mike, thank you. As you can tell, rezoning to, from residential to anything else is a very touchy subject here. And I know that you did some work in R4 previously, but it seems like we're kind of balancing whether 70 go in R4 or if it's spread out amongst the two. So are there some other options? Did you guys explore any alternatives where you're not packing 70 into R4?
Chairman Gray, Commissioner Corey, so the thing that we explored was developing the property to the south that's R4 because it's already zoned. And so that property, if this rezoning case were not to move forward, the intent would be to develop that property with 70 multifamily units because that's what allowed there, and that would entail 3 buildings on that R4 property, with them being pushed up closer to Mountainside Drive. Again, much more obstructive views, significantly less open space. We did not explore developing that property to the north. This is our exploration of that development proposal, and it's really, the exploration is, rather than 70 units on that south parcel, spreading them out and then just adding an additional 10 units. It is not the intent of this developer to build a single family home product on that R110. It would be just developing that property to the south with the 70 units. But as far as exploring it, I completely agree to your point that really the decision in front of the commission is the by right developments that could be on that south parcel, north parcel, or this rezoning proposal. And I think the appropriate considerations to balance are 70 units, the by right scenario is 70 units on the property to the south, and that results in kind of in a lot of those design issues that we discussed. And for the property to the north, that's a single family zoning district, which results in single family homes there. And I know there's been a lot of discussion about the amount of homes that could go there. You are legally allowed to build 13, and you'd have to do an analysis of exactly how many that you could fit there. And you would need to make some improvements to the drainage area to get 13. Without doing any improvements, you could probably get 6 or 7. But the important point is single family homes can be up to 30 feet in height. And so any single-family development on that north parcel is going to require those homes to be located much closer to Mountainside Drive. And so then you have all the concerns that you hear about obstructing views become far worse with that single-family development. So really when you're then comparing it to our development proposal, you're really just looking at 10 units in addition from what's to the south, and then the ways that we now, because we're going through the process, how we've designed it in a way to listen to the concerns and do our very best to address those concerns, and then also offer solutions to problems, whether it's no parking on Mountainside Drive, restricting that southern driveway, intersection improvements. And so I think those are the appropriate considerations.
Okay, thank you.
One more.
One more.
Well, maybe. And this actually is for Farhad. So do we know for a fact, considering the building envelope, that they can get 70 units into that south piece of property? Considering setbacks, building heights, all of the regulations that they have to comply with, can they actually get 70 units on it?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Watts, we haven't done the calculation to determine if that would be
What's your best
viable
guess?
alternative. It would be quite dense if they were to, and
So that's tough, and it goes back to my question a while ago about the building envelope. You know, what can they put there? We're restricted on height, but the building envelope itself is a restriction as well. And if it's a percentage of whatever that square footage is, and we've got hillside cut and fill issues as well, it could become inherently problematic for the developer to try to get the 70 units on. So I'd like to have some information on that.
Mr. Merwitz,
Could I address
Sure.
that question quickly?
yeah, no, I've got a couple for you after that.
So the site plan that we put together, and I'm going to put it here for the property to the south, does meet the minimum development standards under the Town of Fountain Hills zoning ordinance. So this is that development to the south with 3 buildings that has 70 units. And some of the consequences that you get when you have now 3 buildings rather than 4 buildings, with 3 having 70 units, is that we currently have a mix of 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, and 3 bedrooms. So we have some larger units with our development proposal to the north. A development to the south with 3 buildings with 70 units, that unit mix needs to come down, and the 1 bedrooms are going to need to be a much higher percentage. You'd eliminate the 3 bedrooms, so you'd have 1 and 2 bedrooms, which is how you'd fit the 70. But this site plan meets the minimum development standards under the Town of Fountain Hills, and could be developed there. And this is the 30 feet in height maximum within the minimum building setbacks and within the density allowances that are allowed there.
Mr. Merwitz, a couple of questions for you, and sorry if I glazed over this, but I was looking for some context to ownership and metering strategy. How are these individual units going to be addressed?
Chairman Gray, this is a for-rent product. The demand that for this area right now is rentals, not ownership. And I know we heard some concerns that a lot of times we like to see ownership rental units because that gives a little bit more or skin in the game for future residents. But what I will say to that point is that this is a luxury product. It will be marketed as a luxury product, and it will have finishes that are consistent with a luxury community. And so while you don't have pride of ownership, what you do have is pride of residents living in a luxury community that continues to be a luxury place to live. And so you'll have that pride in order to make sure that it is maintained that way. The developer is certainly, if the market changes, then it is very easy to do something like condominiumize the development, and then that way it could be sold for ownership later. But certainly the initial intent now is for it to be a rental product.
Okay. So building level metering then?
The building level metering, so it's, I believe, in fact, I might want Ron to address this. I believe it's all, it's not individually metered for the unit.
That's what I'm looking for. And then,
Chairman Gray, I just overheard Ron. So electric will be individually metered. Things like water would not.
okay. And then on the traffic impact study, is that at an opinion level, or is there a full-blown study at this time?
Chairman Gray, that is a traffic analysis that is not a full-blown study, but it is probably a little bit more detailed than what you'd customarily see as far as just a minimum statement, and it's addressed things like speed counts on Mountainside Drive, traffic on Mountainside Drive, so there are actual counts done on those streets.
Okay, and then I'm sure we'll get into this a little bit later too, but the discussion, traffic for me too is probably the number one concern by far here. The I think I want to put a big X through the pork chop idea. I think that just is going to send kids through the neighborhood to get to school rather than out to the main thoroughfare. But I am curious on discussions that have or haven't happened at this point with staff on, potentially introducing a right-left turn lane on the center there on Mountainside, from Palisades up to, what is that, Ponderosa? Ponderosa potentially, so that you can at least get out of the development or get into the center median so that you can turn into the development and still allow traffic to bypass. And then I realize it's a 30-foot wide street, so there's probably some discussion there with the city property to the northwest. And then also kind of complementary to that, if there's been any conversation with the town engineer on an island, introduction of an island, and this not necessarily development driven, but complementary if we're gonna develop this corner. A turnout island onto Palisades. You can still make that left onto Palisades, sit there safely, and then merge onto Palisades. Any of that come up in conversation at this point?
So, Chairman Gray, to address your questions. First, with respect to the turn lane on Mountainside Drive, we did have our traffic engineer look into this because we thought a left turn lane might make sense if you could provide it. The problem that you have is Mountainside Drive has an existing width now of 32 feet, which is not enough, and it's already got one lane in each direction. There's not enough width there currently to add another lane for a turn lane or a dedicated left turn lane. And the other problem that you have is so the reason also, so in addition, there's not enough width to do it. We did have our traffic engineer look at, is it really needed? How much would there actually be stacking on Mountainside Drive when you're making the left in or when you're exiting if you have to wait at the intersection? And I found that given what's the existing volume of traffic on Mountainside Drive and the anticipated traffic to be generated by this project, you'd only have a maximum of 1 or 2 cars making that left at any given time. And so there really isn't a need or a warrant for having that additional left turn lane there. But there's also just not the width on Mountainside Drive to do it.
So it would take some coordination and participation from the town to facilitate widening to get there. I think, obviously you're not at a full-blown study at this point, but even study aside, we've all sat there and observed that intersection, and it's not good. And so I think introduction, or at least further consideration over and above what the numbers might show, is probably warranted in that location. So we'll probably get into that a little bit later here. And then one last one I'd just like you to consider: if we get all the way to a motion tonight, in your stipulations, a maximum of 4 residential buildings are permitted on the site, consisting of 6.28 acres. I would just want to close the loophole there and add a max number of units per building as well, so that you couldn't inadvertently 10 years from now end up with one large building holding all 70 units. So,
Chairman Gray, great suggestion. We are happy to add that stipulation language to subsection A. And in fact, we have the site plan where we could do that now. And in fact, the way that could read is no more than 24 units per building, or you could say, because there's one of our buildings that's 24, the rest are averaging about 18. So if it said no more than 24 per building, that would certainly keep us under that 80.
okay, thank you. And then one for Farhad, just ahead of public hearing. Farhad, could you just enlighten us, how are STIPs in this manner? How are they handled, made available, thought about in the future? Typically when we have STIPs, we put them in a PAD type scenario, and here we're tying it directly to a rezone. Could you just educate us on that a little bit?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. So the STIPs that you have before you were included with the thought that they may in fact be edited as we're speaking about it up here, to tailored in such a way to directly address some of the concerns that are mentioned. And then they will be, assuming that it will be approved with those conditions, they will be incorporated into the ordinance language that's going to be presented before the town council, because after all, a rezone does require a written ordinance. And then it will be tagged to the property for any like future site plan reviews or replats through our permit database.
Okay, and then just one other question. Is town engineer, is he here this evening by chance?
The town engineer is present and
Okay.
available as well.
I was wondering, any commissioners want to hear from the town engineer at all before we go to public hearing?
Yes.
Yeah, could we bring him up, please?
David?
Thanks for joining us.
You're welcome. Good evening, Chairman, members of the Commission. I have reviewed the traffic impact statement, and I am in agreement with the procedures that they use, and it was done properly. The thing that I've been talking with other staff about is that retaining wall on the opposite corner of Palisades and Mountainside. That's something that I would like to discuss with the developer and with the engineer about addressing that to increase the level of the line of sight, to be able to perhaps increase that line of sight to make that left turn onto Palisades.
And just your thoughts, albeit based on some pretty preliminary information at this point, but thoughts on closing the southwest drive and forcing all that traffic to the northwest, and any potential platooning or backing up to, it's not so much, I don't think, that we're concerned about platooning on Mountainside. It's that we're concerned about a couple cars backed up on Mountainside and somebody comes off of Palisades at 30 mile an hour, is maybe not going to have the opportunity to stop without having some sort of ability to slip off and wait for the turn in.
Yes, Chairman, members of the Commission, I believe that the distance from Palisades to the location of the driveway is far enough where we wouldn't see that issue. And they did actually review, or they changed their traffic impact statement, revised it to show the impact of closing that southern driveway. And so by doing that, they did look at the level of service of the driveway, and it's still at a level of service A in both directions going into and out of the driveway. So I think that I don't have a lot of heartburn with closing that southern entrance, especially given the topography with headlights shining into the folks directly opposite those single-family residences.
Okay, and then just one last one for me, and I'll turn it over to the other commissioners. One of the stipulations proposed in here is to work with town staff on introduction of some traffic calming along Mountainside. Your thoughts there, or your level of engagement in that to date?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, I haven't been engaged with that. That's something that we have our own neighborhood traffic management process to look into putting in speed humps or speed cushions to see if they're first warranted. We have to realize that when you put those in on any street, it's because there's speeding and you want to try to calm that traffic. But one of the things that we need to do is anyone that is going to be affected by that, which is pretty much all of the surrounding residents, would have to be on board with that. We would have to do a survey of all of them, and there would have to be a petition that would be signed by them. And if it's even warranted, we need to do our own speed analysis there to see if it's warranted. So that's not something that we just willy-nilly try to put down. Okay, let's put some traffic calming. Let's do some. That's the worst thing, because people do hear that. They will hear cars braking and going over that, and it's over and over and over again. So that's something we take very, very seriously, and it's not something that we just willy-nilly would do. I'm more looking at how we could address that wall for line of sight to see if that could be made any better, and if not, then certainly something else with that intersection to address those left turn lanes.
Okay. And this is just a matter of opinion, but your thoughts on speed tables at intersections versus, you know, speed humps throughout the thoroughfare?
Yeah, I mean, speed tables are interesting. They will certainly slow down folks that are approaching the intersection from all directions. So that's something that you want to, not something that you really want to do on an arterial road like Palisades Boulevard. So that's something that we probably wouldn't entertain.
But on Mountainside at the two intersections there to calm that traffic?
Oh, you mean at, that is a possibility. Again, it falls under our neighborhood traffic management process.
Okay, so that would go through the same survey and?
Yes.
Okay, very, very good. Commissioners, Commissioner Watts?
Have you by chance had the pleasure, the opportunity to park on Mountainside?
I have not.
You should take it. You should go. So my question becomes, your thoughts on how do we prevent parking? You know, being 32 feet wide, number one, and I did exactly what I'm talking about, pull up on the sidewalk, roll right up over top of the rolled curb, watch people blow through the stop sign. So we have two major issues. One is traffic calming, and the other one is parking, because with that 32-foot width of the street, 16 feet each way, doesn't suggest parking is a good idea. Removing the rolled curb and putting in vertical curbing on both sides of the road, because you can't just do it on one, right? So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman and Commissioner, I agree with that. I think by removing the roll curb and putting in vertical curb would be more of a detriment to parking on Mountainside Drive. We wouldn't want to paint the curb red, though. That's not something that we would want to do. But certainly changing to full height vertical curb is a possibility. There may be some other traffic calming things in the toolbox to stop folks from parking along Mountainside. We can certainly look into some of those other possibilities like chicanes or things of that nature. We can look into things like that.
So if we move forward and the applicant agrees to some of these stipulations to work with you, do you think you can come up with a reasonable solution that accommodates, it's not 100% foolproof, but you think you can come up with some solutions that would restrict parking and calm traffic?
Yes, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Yes, I truly believe that we can come up with something between all of us, that staff and the developer's engineer and myself, to come up with something that would improve the situation and deter parking along Mountainside.
Thank you.
Commissioner DePaul.
Yeah, I wanted to ask Farhad one more question. Just want to get a clear understanding of this. So these stipulations, okay, do they still apply if this motion does not move forward and he goes back to developing just the R4? Let's say 2A and B, is it 2A and B? Yeah, more on the mechanical systems. Could he just go ahead and decide to throw up 70 condensers on the roof if this motion does not apply to rezone?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner DePaul, if I understand your question correctly, the conditions here before you assumes approval on the rezone. Now, if the recommendation is to deny by the Planning and Zoning Commission, it will still go forward to the Town Council, and we will still reintroduce these stipulations as part of the ordinance.
Chairman Gray, Commissioner DePaul, just to address that, to be very clear, these stipulations would be stipulations of approval of the rezoning. So they absolutely would not apply if the rezoning were not approved. They're to be approved alongside the rezoning.
That's what I wanted. All right, thank you.
Commissioners, any other questions for the town engineer? All right, let's go ahead and open the public comment portion of our hearing here this evening. Paula, speaker cards.
There are 13 speaker cards. Oh, and one more. That's okay, Lori. All right, so, hi, well, hello. Okay, thanks. Anybody else? Okay. I'll read them in order, in threes. First speaker is John Kavanaugh, then Cheryl Norton, and Jeannie Mago.
So just a couple rules of the, interim rules of the road tonight, if you don't mind, just to keep this moving along. Of course, you have 3 minutes up here on the speaker. Mr. Kavanaugh, I'm sure you know that. 3 minutes on the timer here. You'll get a beep at 30 seconds remaining, and then a continuous beep at 0. If you would, please refrain from the applause between speakers here tonight so we can keep things moving along. And if what you have to say has been said already, feel free to announce that. No need for for everyone to repeat the same thing if it's already been said. So, Senator Kavanaugh.
Thank you. State Senator John Kavanaugh. I live a couple blocks from the project. I am a red dot. I oppose the project. I opposed it at the last P&Z meeting. I oppose it even more now. I think the commission rightfully saw that the public was concerned about the traffic situation and also about the aesthetics. That's why they asked the applicant to come back and try to get the entrance and exit onto Palisades and to move the buildings back. The bottom result is there's no entrance on Palisades proposed, and they didn't really move the buildings back. 2 of the buildings they pivoted. There's a big difference between moving something back and pivoting. So the results there were not especially concerning to me. And now, of course, we add that we're going to get speed bumps, which is everybody's favorite traffic device. So now on a hill, cars, when they approach the speed bump, will abruptly slow down, go over the speed bump, and then accelerate, which will, of course, cause uneven traffic speed, which is dangerous, which will cause engine noise for the people whose houses are there, and will cause additional exhaust as they rev up. Don't do us any favors. Keep your speed bumps. Look, traffic safety is still a problem. Amazingly, the town has an environmental plan that when my wife was mayor, she voted on, that we should make our town street and bicycle friendly. And this is going to be a disaster for that road and elsewhere. It doesn't help at all. Now, look, there are 2 questions before you. The first question is, are we going to override local zoning? And the second question is, if so, then let's talk about traffic studies and buildings and everything else. Those are the 2 big questions. Look, today I had the privilege of being the lead speaker against SB 1117, which would have stripped city governments of most zoning authority over residential properties and would have made boards like yours literally extinct because you'd have virtually no say. I did that because I respect zoning. When I bought my property and built my house, and I think everybody else here, the same thing is true, right? We said, what's around us? And we didn't want apartments on that lot. We didn't want to see them. I believe that you have to have a really good reason to change zoning in that way. So for me, I would say this. If you don't think helping the developers get some more units in, if you don't think that is a good reason, then the answer to the first question is no, and everything else is a waste of time. You just don't do it because it's wrong, because you're basically violating the trust that all of these people put when they took the biggest investment of their house and bought their house and paid their mortgage. That's the violation. If you think there's a good reason to do that, then you move on to all the other questions that have consumed much of this evening. I don't think it's a good reason. I think you have to have a much better reason. And I don't think they can get 70 units on that lot. I've heard one of our prior planning people on the town knew that lot, said, you can't get 40 there in his opinion. Maybe you get 40 there in your opinion. Whoops. And so the bottom line is, you're not going to get 70 crammed in. They couldn't move those 2 buildings on the south lot. They couldn't move them an inch because of restrictions. They're going to put a 3rd building there. I heard from a current staff member that there's major drainage problems there. So this is not about having 70 packed in there, right? This is about having maybe 40 on that lot if you keep this one the way it is. So 1 family where we want it, maybe 40 there. That's what and I think that's what the people are willing to accept, because that's what the zoning was when we moved here. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Cheryl Norton.
Paula, let's go ahead and call an on deck.
Okay, so after Cheryl Norton, we have Jean Mayu, Joe DeLuca, Doreen DeLuca, or DeLucia, and Liz Gildersleeve.
Thank you, Paul.
Good evening, Chairman and Commissioners. My name is Cheryl Norton. My
Cheryl,
husband and I,
pull that mic down a little closer to you, Cheryl. Thanks.
Is that better? Okay. My husband and I live at 16073 East Ponderosa, so we are right at ground zero. We're right across the street from the south parcel. And the renderings that you see tonight still block our view of the mountains. You don't see from their pictures very much of the mountains like we bought our house for and what we see today. We, as well as residents in our subdivision, were grossly misled by this developer. This developer's consultant, Mike Miller, visited the residents in our subdivision and gave the impression when they showed us the plan, as proposed, that they owned the north parcel at Palisades and Mountainside, when in fact it is still owned by Trinity Lutheran Church. The developer's consultant, Mike Miller, showed us a plan as proposed and advised if the rezoning to R3 on both parcels was not done, they would build at least 3 apartment buildings close together, consisting of studio and very small one-bedroom units on the south parcel. Was this meant to be an ultimatum? The original real estate listing states that only 30 units would be approved for development on the south parcel. In addition, the site plan of only building on the south parcel would also eliminate our view and the neighbor's view. There would also be more traffic, no matter what, on Ponderosa, on Mountainside and the surrounding streets. The water supply would be impacted, as well as water drainage, by adding even more concrete and asphalt. Lights would be shining in the single-family homes to the west. Also, how can we be sure that the view would be preserved on the proposed plan if the builder hits rock that can't be drilled as far down as they say they will? We, as well as the majority of homeowners in Lost Hills, oppose any building on these lots as proposed by the developer. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Cheryl. Folks, let's hold the applause, please.
Hi, my name is Jeannie Mayu. There's a reason why this lot has not been built on. It's impossible. The traffic is impossible. The drainage is impossible. The attorney that has presented his case today has said a few deceptive things. I have to be honest, I've been on his side. My husband, who has since passed, was a multifamily architect. And normally they would introduce the architect, not the attorney. He has said that we have beautiful designs. We're presenting beautiful designs. It was a black and white picture of some random apartment. It was not a rendering. And this is what we need in this today. They had 2 months to do that. He said, well, we're going to reduce the traffic. I live on Tumbleweed. All of that traffic is going to go down my street. Another deceptive thing he said was, yes, you can build these for rent apartments and then turn them into condos and sell them. No, that's not how that works. Builders don't build apartments to sell. They're different walls, they're different utilities, everything is different. That's a lie, I'm sorry. And by the way, I'm a red dot, and there's a lot of red dots in that neighborhood, and it was deceptive for him to present that everyone's a blue and a green dot. So they're going to be shortcutting through my neighborhood. That's the main thing for me. And people drive really fast down Mountainside in the first place. It's going to be a disaster. They said, oh, this is another deceptive thing he said. Well, we promise that the landlord will enforce the no parking signs and just tell the renters to move. That's not going to happen. When has that ever happened in an apartment building? And why would the landlord be motivated to do that? So let's see, the fire department probably would not approve the density for R4 for 70, was it 70? 70 units? It's just too dense in this town, and it's too much of a fire danger. Now, I could be wrong about that. I don't know how it works here in Fountain Hills, but I know in Los Angeles it would not have been approved. I think that's it. Oh, yeah. I have a question. If this gets approved, why can't we just put egress onto Fountain Hills or Palisades? You know, where the church is, you could maybe put the traffic going through there. I have a feeling you guys are going to approve this, so that's why it's my last thing I wanted to say. Thanks.
Thank you, Jean.
Joe DeLucia.
Good evening, Chairman and Council. Obviously, you know I live across the street from the project. I'm the one that this probably affects a lot with our other neighbors that live next to us. But just remember, there was 144 red dots last time, okay? These guys have brought you the green. They haven't brought you the red, okay? And I am strongly opposed to this project, and as far as their traffic study that they're saying they did, I live on there, and the traffic study was done between Lost Hills and Sunflower on the other end towards El Lago. Why wouldn't they do the traffic study between Ponderosa and Tumbleweed, where most of the traffic is exiting going out to Palisades? I don't understand that. And also the traffic study that was done on Palisades when they had their little rope out there, that thing got run over, torn out, and it was not probably registering. Maybe it did for one day, I'm not too sure. So I don't understand how they're getting accurate studies. I was called for Hod and let him know about this. He told me to call the attorney myself. I don't understand why as a citizen, hadn't even called the attorney to let him know. I thought it would be their job to do that. I was letting my city representative know, okay? The other thing is that 60% that they're saying that's opened, that there's including all your washes and everything. That's not including just without the drainage. That's probably including the drainage. And that 3.6 acre parcel, for what I understand, there's only 1 acre of developable land on that. So I don't know how they plan on getting 13 houses on there, if you even possibly could. Someone said 6, but if it's 1 acre, that's 40,000 feet, 10,000 per house. That's about 4 houses. They have to put roads in there and stuff. So it would be a lot less traffic there. And just like Cheryl said, from what I understand too, when that lot was being sold, there was only supposed to be 30 units, I heard. How could someone come in there and put 70 units? I think it's a pipe dream. And I think that these guys are deceiving us, and we need to work for the people of the town, not for the developer, not for the attorney, not for the other builder. You guys work with us, for us. And I'm strongly opposed to the project.
Thank you, Joe.
I'm Doreen DeLucia, his wife. You know, what they presented here today is not much of a change for what you guys asked for. And it is laughable that he says, the attorney says, that this is going to reduce the traffic. We know the traffic is a problem, but it's not going to reduce the traffic. The other issue that I have is that they're presenting this as one lot. Part of it is R4, the one that they purchased. The other part is R10. R10 is single-family home. That's what we bought into. But that R10 piece of property belongs to the church. That church property is one whole piece of property. It is not broken off yet. It is not a done deal. It's still deeded in the church's name. They still own it. It's 3.1 acres of their 5.63 acres that the church sits on, that the address is Fountain Hills Boulevard. The rest of that property is not an address. It doesn't belong to them. They present it with their address, their piece of property that they purchased, with 2 parcel numbers. They're not being honest 100% here. I understand it may be contingent to the zoning change, but the zoning can't be changed by somebody who doesn't own it. That's not right. They're trying to grasp to get as much as they can so they can spread this out so that they can build bigger. This is not good for our neighborhood. We are a single-family home neighborhood. We are not Scottsdale. This is Fountain Hills. Scottsdale has flat land, places to build, tons of apartment buildings. This neighborhood was not meant for that. We need to keep it the zoning of R3, R10, the way we bought our neighborhood, bought our houses, and what we live here for. We moved up here, we made a choice because this is what we have here. Beautiful views, our neighborhood, our small town, people who are personal with one another. We go out, we run into people that we meet. It's not meant to be congested and stack people in like a bunch of sardines. That's what I have to say.
Good evening, Liz Gildersleeve. Like the C.O. Saguaro property mentioned in the call to public, the mountainside rezoning issue tonight also pertains to a land ordinance, pure and simple. And just a reminder that everyone in the Lost Hills neighborhood purchased their homes with the expectation that the property at the corner of Palisades and Mountainside was zoned single family. And that is still our expectation. We've only been in our home 9 years, but most of my neighbors have lived in their homes for decades. Changing the zoning now to placate a developer and to the detriment of the neighborhood would be unconscionable. Not to mention that this zoning change would also increase the density and street issues for an area that already grapples with a busy, narrow mountainside, which as it exists now would be completely inadequate for more density. Again, I ask that you deny the developer's rezoning request, keep the zoning as single family, the way the town planned this neighborhood decades ago, and I would also just like to let the developer know when they put up their green dot, blue dot sign, the dot over my home was wrong. So I don't know who did your data collection, but don't use them again. Thank you.
The next three speakers in order are Sharon Hutchinson, Farrell Pallas, and Rick Sugg.
No, it's my seeing eye dog. Thank you. Sharon Hutchison, Tumbleweed Drive. Chairman and Commissioners, I'm here to, number one, since I wasn't called early, I'm here to agree with pretty much everything everyone said so far. But I'm also speaking in opposition to the proposed zoning change, particularly on the R1. And I am doing that for several reasons. Number one, and I have to correct something someone said earlier. I don't think those of us in opposition to this, and there are about 200 of us that we counted, we are not opposed to any development. We are opposed to additional multifamily development. We are not opposed to single-family development. We all bought our houses assured by the town that they had designated that parcel R110, and we didn't buy houses near the airport and then complain about noise from the airplanes. We bought houses in a single-family neighborhood, and we were assured by the town that that parcel, the R110 parcel, would be single-family homes. So I'm going to take a little bit different take here. I'm going to say when I was going through all this stuff, I remembered that we don't just live in a democracy, we live in a democratic republic. And as such, our appointed and elected officials have the ability to share their opinion, and they're also there to respect and represent ours, your constituents. We have over 200 people who are opposed to this, and I ask that you respect the wishes of your constituents and over the wishes of a developer. But I have one last thing to say, and this has been on my mind for a while, and I don't really know the answer to it. But when we're talking about the lots, in particular the R110 lot that the church owns, that's one lot. But it is part of the Tocopilla subdivision. So in order to be able to sell that, you have to split that lot. You can't sell a lot that's part of another lot. And that R110 is all one parcel. So you can't split that, or you can't sell that without doing a lot split. I couldn't see that there was a lot split, but then I was informed by a former planner that that lot, as well as the R4 lot, is part of a subdivision, that Tocopilla, whatever it is, subdivision. Yes, thank you. And as such, you can't subdivide a lot that's in a subdivision. So I don't know exactly how they propose to do that or how you propose to sell that. But I do know in the ordinances that within a subdivision, you can't subdivide another lot. So please listen to our wishes. We hope the developer has a good time. I'm sure he can build whatever he wants to build. The land is very challenging. I don't think he'll get that number of units, but that's up to him. Thank you very much.
Senator, the vice chair just said they do marriages for $50 across the hall.
Hi, I'm Farrell Palace. I'm a 20-year resident. This is very related to what I'm about to tell you, but I am at the intersection of Lost Hills and Ponderosa. Now, when the renters of these proposed apartments realize that there's no visibility at the intersection of Mountainside and Palisades, they'll take other streets to get to Palisades. I mean, we're so focused on this Mountainside, no, they will find other ways to get to Palisades. They can zip up Ponderosa, Mountainside, Ponderosa, zip up Ponderosa, then take a right onto Lost Hills, just zip down that little hill there, you're at Palisades. Or they'll take Lost Hills, which is a straight shot from Mountainside. So you just go straight up Lost Hills, no stop signs, nothing to worry about, you're at Palisades. So, as I said, my house is at the intersection of Ponderosa and Lost Hills. Now, if we assume that there could be 2 drivers per apartment, then we're talking about 160 cars reasonably. I mean, tell me if I've got this wrong. So this means 160 more cars are driving up Ponderosa. They're driving up Lost Hills, right by my house, in which I have lived 20 years, bought it with my husband in 2002. We moved here for the beauty. We moved here for the quiet. We moved here for the feeling of, yeah, exactly. So, too much traffic, too much noise. The value of my home will decrease. It will not be the quiet house we bought 20 years ago, and I will have to leave my little community.
Hey, good evening. I'm Rick Sugg. I'm at 16050 East Ponderosa, my wife Kim, and we are vehemently opposed to this. The developer came through to talk to the houses. We were misrepresented on the depiction as well. There's been a lot of misrepresentation by the attorney. I'm a little disappointed, a lot disappointed in staff. I spent 15 years in public service with land use, planning, zoning, and haven't done it for a long time, but supported commissions like yourself and county commissions, served on state boards. That's just to tell you I know a little bit about what's going on. Excuse me. Been a long day. I've been in meetings all day. So people are like electricity or water. They're going to flow to the easiest path. And the easiest path is not going to be Mountainside. I mean, Mountainside and Palisade. It's going to be taking the side streets. And it's going to go right past our homes where we have people walking all the time. It's already a nightmare where it's at on Mountainside. That street should be at least 60 foot wide. I don't understand the engineer's discussion, or I haven't read the analysis. If this moves forward, I am going to do some research in your regulation. It is not a matter of right to have 70 units. You still have to take care of the impacts of the community, and the staff should, by regulation, be able to put whatever necessary impacts are on the community on that developer and make sure that they take care of it. That is just, I keep hearing this, and these guys are trying to hold a shotgun to your head and say, take the lesser of two evils. No, that's not the way it works. Represent the people, take care of the people. The views are going to be impacted ridiculously. That is why everybody bought here. And I just hope that you stick to your guns and help out the people in this community. And putting it on staff to take care of any kind of, you know, will you work with the developer to take care of this issue? I'm sorry, that's a bit of a push-off or a cop-out in my view. You don't put it on staff, you make the decision to make the recommendation, and you make sure they put that in front of you in black and white so you can see it. And if you can't see it, what are you making a decision on? I don't understand that. Sorry, I'm tired. It's been a long day. We are vehemently opposed to this. I'll talk to the attorney, I'll talk to any of these guys, and if this goes forward, I will be researching every regulation you have. I've written regulation, I understand it very well. We will figure this out, and we will fight it. Thank you.
Next three speakers in order are Dave Boyer, Gretchen Boyer, and Clyde Hertig.
Chairman Gray and Commission, I'm Dave Boyer, and I live just across the street from the only exit they're proposing. And at 160 cars, I would say that's a decent average. We'll be seeing nothing but traffic on the corner of Tumbleweed and where my house is located. Again, I'm not going to reiterate all the great things people have said before me, but during the last meeting, I think there were two commissioners that really, I thought, highlighted some specific areas here. Number one, I think it was Commissioner Corey who stated the fact that the original zoning was a pledge to our community in terms of residential, and that in fact you are betraying the trust of those folks that spent a lot of money building these homes. The second comment I thought was very critical as well, again, was Commissioner Watts when he insisted, and they totally avoided this, in terms of routing people onto Palisades. They didn't address that issue with you. It's a couple of culverts we were concerned about. That's not the issue. The issue is that part of the community in terms of safety, views obviously, and of course now with that traffic coming right at our house, it's going to be a real big difference in terms of what residential means to me. Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Gretchen Boyer, and I basically have to address about 5 or 6 issues. The first one that you heard plenty things about, especially most eloquently from my husband, is the traffic issue. So I'm not even going to go any further than that with that. With the dark city that we are noted for, as David indicated, we will have the lights from approximately 160 vehicles with rental units, that's probably going to be more, going right into our beautiful backyard and destroying what Fountain Hills stands for. The next area is our property value. We moved here 3 years ago. We invested, as you know, property value here is pretty high, and we invested to get what we consider to be our forever home. You will take us out when we're dead, or near dead anyway. With this rental building of 70 units there, do you think that's going to increase our property value? I don't think so. Okay. The other was mentioned about zoning, and I will repeat this because I think it's an important statement to know, that zoning is meant to be changed under extreme circumstances, not a developer making money off of putting 70 units in, not over-threatening putting 70 units on a small strip of land where we all know they couldn't do it with hopefully the rules and regulations that we had to go through when we built on our land. I'm sure this town has rules and regs that developers have to follow too. With that, you can tell I'm opposed to the development. I hope you think with and act with your heart. Think if you were living where we're living, would you want that next door to you? Would you want to hear all the traffic noises? That's for you to decide, and I hope you vote heartily. Thank you.
I'm Clyde Hertig. I spoke last time also. So in the presentation, I just happened to notice a couple of things. After I spoke last week, the person who represents the company did come to my house and apologized for having our home misrepresented on the map with the pins. Now, we were told today there were 58 letters of support. And when I looked at the map while the discussion was going on, I counted approximately 15 of those supposedly came from the affected areas, which were bounded by Palisades, Cavern, and Mountainside, and the main road on the south side, El Lago. Now, also, it's was supposedly 70 units in the diagram that were going to be on the south property, if that's all they developed. I counted that there were 75 units in that drawing. So I found that interesting. I also went to the information evening, which was first developed, the developer had a couple months ago. And I believe the traffic count said it was going to be 480 vehicles coming out of this property, which I thought was unbelievable. And I think today we're now saying 160, which I don't know. If the number of vehicles on Mountainside, if it's totally 480, so now we're talking about a third of the vehicles in addition to what was there, I guess. I don't know what the count is, but that's my main concern. I walk every day in our neighborhood. I walk on Mountainside, sometimes in the evenings. I carry a flashlight. I shine the flashlight at people, and people are just speeding there. When they come off Palisades, everyone has these tinted windows nowadays. They can't see out the side windows. We're a dark sky community. It's very hard walking down, and of course, you know, people don't stop at the stop signs, and it's quite dangerous the way it is right now. We also have a number of school buses every day driving down Tumbleweed. Now, why is that? They drive by my house, they're empty, they're going over to the high school, and they're coming down Tumbleweed, turning left onto Mountainside, left onto Palisades, and then going into the school because the entranceway is on the north side of Palisades. So this is, I think, what is going to be happening with this other development. Uh-oh. Okay.
Couple more seconds.
You know, the exit to Palisades, we were talking before that it needed culverts. I thought it would be too expensive also when we were here last week. I believe Mr. Watts spoke about that, but I think it's reasonable that the expense be paid. And if they want to go ahead with this thing, that's what they should do. Otherwise, I would say just build on the south property. And I believe Mr. Watts also said, and I agree, that the entrance and exit to that property needs to be at Ponderosa if they're going to be building it the other way. And if that's the case, it's right in the middle of where they're going to be putting their buildings. So I don't know what the answer is, and I'm not against development, but I don't like what's happening here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hurd.
Next three speakers. Next three speakers in order are Lori Troller, Ed Stizza, and Brett Hawkins.
Good evening, Chairman, Commissioners. A little bit of a different slant, and don't mistake this for I'm against this too, but I've lived here for 27 years and have a wonderful neighbors, wonderful views, great. I love where I am. 2 years ago, the house to my backyard burned down to the ground. They've rebuilt. If that house, what they just built, was there when I bought my house, I would have never have even thought about it. It lowered the value of my home, it's awful. Same situation. Beauty's in the eye of the beholder. If they built a different home that I liked, I'd be loving it, right? It would be wonderful. So I don't know, dare I say this? You see these buildings in Scottsdale, the big, huge apartment buildings, nothing big like that, but the glass where the gardens are hanging over, that to me, if I were in these homes looking at that, a design like that, a little easier versus just the same old stucco we're always seeing. And that's way out of character with what we see, the glass, it's so super modern, but where they have the facade, the living facades, which is, they're talking about their view being gone, but if we're adding a living facade, it's a little easier. So that's my only, maybe the design, totally different, and then we can't require that, but I'm just thinking out loud, so thank you.
Thank you. Ed Stizza?
I can go. Hi, I'm Brett Hawkins. Commissioner Gray, I'd like to ask if anybody has checked to see whether or not the map that they've shown with the pins is accurate. Anybody here on this board? I did bring this up in January, and I'm hearing again that these things are not correct, and that some would look at it as a lie. I look at it as a lie. My neighbors around me, I'm very close to all of them, 5 of them. I've talked to, and hey, they're very open to me about, we absolutely cannot have this, just no way. And they're marked as either neutral or not marked at all. These would all be red dots. So what I'm asking, if you go to the next step, find out if they're telling you the truth. I won't do business with anybody who lies to me. These guys, I think, might be lying to you and all of us. It's disrespectful. That's all I have to say.
Ed Stizza?
Chairman, Commissioners, this is a traffic issue and a zoning problem, obviously. So we already know that. All this stuff is all concerns. But one thing I want to say is that we have got to get everybody on board protecting this town. It's going down, it's going down the tubes in a lot of aspects, and that's not good. I mean, we don't have any land left. I've said this before. This is also a density and aesthetic and dark sky problem. There's not one of these renderings that these guys did with the lighting in it. not one. Show the lighting. Show the lighting. I said this at the last meeting. But they're not going to show that because that's going to make all of this even worse. The renderings that you guys asked for, great idea. Did they provide them? No. So, because it will show exactly what's going on to the general public that can't visualize those drawings. It's really cut and dry. So, hopefully everybody makes the right decision. And we've got to stop giving in to everybody, so, including the staff. So, we've got to protect the town. So, thank you.
Next three speakers in order are Ron Schwartz, I believe Frank Orlando, and Gail Evans.
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, I'm Ron Schwartz. I live on East Lost Hills Drive. Just a couple things to support what others have said here. If only the south part is developed, I can tell you where that traffic is going to go. It's going to be a racetrack right up East Lost Hills Drive over to Palisades. I don't drive an SUV all the time like most people do. Once in a while I do, but as it is, when you get down, even going west on East Lost Hills Drive and want to turn south on Palisades, it is a visual problem there as well. I always feel I'm taking my life in my hands as people are coming from the stop sign to the east. They come out a pretty good clip and doesn't give me much time to try to decide which lane they're in already, whether I dare pull out and go south. There's a lot of people that walk on East Lost Hills Drive, and unfortunately right now we have quite a few cars that park on East Lost Hills Drive too. So as traffic increases, I can only see that there's going to be an issue with some accidents. Plus some people have, myself included, have some pretty steep driveways. So when we come out of those things, we have to be very careful. So we're going cautiously slow. And if traffic comes over a hill pretty fast, I'm concerned about that. I'm fairly new to the community, but one of the reasons I bought here was I like the character of this community. You have some open space. It's not like Scottsdale or Mesa where every single inch is developed. And I think the beauty of this town is that it has some open green space. Space for wildlife, visual space for us to enjoy. And I hope that somehow we can work to preserve that and that developers will see that that's an asset to us, not just the bottom dollar of how many units can we cram into a square foot. So you have a very difficult job as a commission, and I know you'll do the right job.
Frank Orlando. I've been an owner in La Strada for the last 20 years and also president of the HOA. I was curious about the green dots because the green dot that I saw for La Strada was at the pool, so I don't know who he possibly had that was there. But more importantly, I was impressed with the lawyer. I think he did a great job of defending his client. But when I listen to lawyers, I think about what they don't say. And what I didn't hear him say anything, and maybe you guys already know this, that the owner of the property that you're considering to rezone is in support of this. I assume that's a church, correct? So, and I haven't heard anybody from the church say that's here say anything about the property. So I don't know how you can rezone a property without knowing what the owner of the property feels about the situation. The other thing is, I heard a bunch of things saying what might happen on I guess the lower property where they say they can do 70, but until you have a real determination of what can be zoned there and what could be built there, I don't know how you can make an informed opinion about whether or not to approve this. Thank you.
Gail Evans.
This is the very first time for me ever, but first off, I have an invitation for the entire council and anybody else that would like to. I live directly on Palisades, directly across from the property being considered. Anybody that would like to come and sit in the front yard for half a day would see what everybody else is talking about. mostly traffic, but there are other concerns also. All the green dots that were on that map the other day, 3 of us were out over the weekend, and I was going to house and asking various people along Palisades, then down Morningside, about this. And everyone said, no. God, we can't stand more traffic, and they're older people. I have to back out onto Palisades, and it's becoming a nightmare because they will not let up. And from the stoplight all the way up to where I am, just past Wendover, they're already doing 60. And darn proud of it, too. And so it's becoming more dangerous all the time. Another one, because we were out there asking people, and every single one of the ones that I went to, which were inclusive of 11 houses right around the corner, said no. So how long ago did these developers or whoever was out there saying, and they've got all these signatures, how long ago was that? Because if it's any of those people in those houses, they've changed their mind. 3 people told me, yes, they had changed, they did sign, but they didn't realize what they were in for. And now they're saying no. So that is irrelevant to me. But anyway, as far as where I come from, I've been here 22 years, same house, watching the difference in the town, watching how it's growing, whatever. This is one, it's going to be dangerous. It's too close to Fountain Hills Boulevard. The traffic already backs up past Mountain View. So it seems to me it's a cut and dry situation. I know what the developers say, and I know what the lawyers say, and one of them came off the last meeting that we had outside, well, if they say no, we'll develop it anyway. So what does that mean? Not too concerning, and none of them's from this town. They're all from Phoenix or somewhere else. Come and spend a day. I'll invite anybody in my front yard. Just look, because bikers go by, kids walk by, people that come over Palisades going east. There's a hill right there, right just before that block, and you cannot see it until you drive over the top, and Mountain View is right there. So I would respectfully, like I said, I would have like anybody to come in. I'm done. And like I said, scared silly of being up here in the front, but I've seen it and I know. So I would like people that aren't from here to come on over. Just look. Thank you.
Thank you. John, we need a first-time caller bell. Something we can ring.
Chairman, we received a written submittal from Dennis and Renee Martica that they are against agenda item number 5, the rezone.
Thank you, Paula. Were there any other cards filed that were for or against in addition to speakers?
Just the one I read.
Just one. To speak or just to? Okay, yeah, if you could just get those to Paul and we'll get them into the record for you. Of course, you're welcome to speak.
Love to, but I think they've pretty much covered all the bases here. It'd be like beating a horse at this point.
All right, last call for speaker cards. Okay, we will close the public comment portion of the hearing. Let's bring Farhad and the developer back up. Mr. Mirowitz, I assume you have a few things you want to cover, and then we'll open it up to the commissioners for some Q&A.
Thank you, Chairman Gray, commissioners. For your records, Mike Mirowitz with Snell and Wilmer. The concerns that you've heard about traffic, blocking views, congestion, traffic circulation, driving through around people's homes, those all relate to a new multifamily development on this property. But a multifamily development is already approved for this property. Again, I've said in my presentation, the south parcel is zoned R4, which allows by right 70 units that can be built in accordance with the minimum development standards. And I want to point to some of the things in the site plan that I think we've done really well. I mentioned in my presentation that one of the benefits about going through the zoning process is that we get to hear all the comments and feedback from the neighbors, which are very legitimate questions and comments and concerns that they have. But because we're going through the zoning process, we actually get to listen to them and work on ways that we can design the project to do its very best to address those concerns. Now, it would be disingenuous of me to say that we can 100% mitigate every single concern that you've heard. But we can certainly mitigate the concerns far more than what a by right development would be on this property. So I want to highlight some of the things that have been done. You can see on the site plan that all the buildings have been angled significantly from Mountainside Drive. You heard a lot of concerns about views. A by right development could push those buildings up to the minimum setback line, which is 30 feet from the property line, and be exactly parallel to Mountainside Drive, so they would sit significantly above the finished floor elevation. We've gotten building 1 to sit only 1 foot above the finished floor elevation. That doesn't happen in a by right development, but it's a nice feature of this development that addresses some of those concerns. You can also see the amount of open space that is provided. I have never been part of a development project that has 66% open space. Heard a lot of comments about how the character of Fountain Hills is open space, and I agree. It is important that we maintain as much of open space incorporated into the development as we can. The by right development of 70 units on the south parcel is 36% open space. We are an increase of 30% from that. That is a big difference. Then there are other items I think that this does well. You heard comments about access onto the southern driveway on Mountainside Drive and what that would do. Again, this is a way that this development can be a solution to some of these issues. And since the last hearing, we've proposed now to restrict that to emergency access only to resolve some of that concerns. So we've worked incredibly hard on doing the very best we can to design a project that addresses those concerns, which certainly does not happen with a by right development. You heard issues about speeding on Mountainside Drive. Again, we're looking to ways that we can address that, and one of the stipulations would be speed bumps or speed humps to help address those issues. Again, the decision before this commission is not this development or no development. We acknowledge that there are some residents that you heard from in attendance here today that would prefer for these properties not to be developed. But that is not the alternative. The alternative is a development that doesn't get reviewed by the commission or the city council, where these list of stipulations that we've proposed don't apply and they just need to meet the minimum building setback standards. And so with that, with our development, we show you exactly what we are proposing. It's lower units than you could build legally by right on both parcels. It reduces the traffic, significantly increases open space, and designs the building so that they're oriented and pushed down the slope to do its very best to respect the views of the neighboring properties. And so with that, we respectfully request again your recommendation of approval, subject to the 8 stipulations that we've proposed. Thank you.
Commissioners, questions of the applicant or town staff? Commissioner Kovacevic.
I have a question for Farhad. The single-family zoning on the north parcel, what are the lot sizes associated with that zoning?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Kovacevic, the minimum lot size at an R110 zoning designation is 10,000 square feet.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Dempster.
Thank you. Farhad, a question for you. So my guess is the applicant would not propose this project if the lot was not subdividable that the church owns. Can you speak to that?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, so I guess the more accurate terminology, rather than subdividing yet again, would be a replat. Assuming this rezoning proposal is approved, even before the applicant submits a site plan for staff to review, they would need to submit a replat of the Tocopila subdivision, where they would simply reorient or realign some of the property boundaries. But it wouldn't require a subdivision review process, per se.
Okay, thank you. And I wanted to clarify a couple of items, just so, you know, factual information. So someone had mentioned that apartments don't get condominiumized. Four Peaks condominiums used to be an apartment building. There are over 200 properties there. So they started out as apartments. They were condominiumized about 14 years ago. So that does happen. And then just to clarify the process, when a developer, and you please correct me if I'm wrong, when a developer is looking at possibly building a property, they may not have the deal closed on the parcel of land that they're purchasing. Because if the project does not get approved, they might not go forward purchasing the land. So that too is not uncommon, to not own all the land that they plan to put the project on. So I just wanted to clarify those couple of items, if I may. Thank you.
Commissioner Watts.
Farhad, I'm going back to the ability or inability to build 70 units on the south parcel. Was that an accurate representation of the 3 buildings that by quote-unquote right can be built on that property? And if it is, it does require downsizing the units from the more luxurious 3-bedroom or maybe changing the count. So was that a fair representation?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Watts, that was the first time that I've seen that iteration of for that particular parcel. I did not see it clearly enough, other than the fact that there were 3 buildings, if I remember correctly, instead of 4. Is it an accurate representation? I'd have to study a little bit more closely, but it looked like, well, quite obviously, only 3 of the 4, 3/4 of the units that are being proposed may fit there. But,
yeah. And the south side being a little more challenging as far as the contour of the land, the topography, could be a real challenge to get that 3rd building on the south side without a lot of cut and fill that would go on, I would assume.
I would imagine it would require quite a bit of engineering to design it.
And my final comment is, while the presentation has been good, good sales, I think it was remiss in not bringing supporters. The supporters, we've got a lot of detractors that don't want to put the project in, and you've got some data that is in question. So I think it would have behooved you to bring supporters in to help sell the project. So, thank you.
So I find myself kind of torn on this one. I was torn a month ago, and I think there's been some nominal improvements here. I think the stipulations, there's some merit to the stipulations. So a list of things that I think are positives about this. The internal traffic patterns are virtually hidden from the neighborhood and Mountainside. The Parcel A traffic is automatically pushed to the north, given the stipulations to close that south entrance. I think there's a lot of value in that. If the south parcel were to be developed independently, all that traffic dumps out on Mountainside at Ponderosa or thereabouts, and I think that's extremely problematic. So I think there's benefit there. The open space, I agree. I think that that's, I think that that's by default because of the topography, but open space is open space at the end. I would like to see the south parcel exhibit again, the one that's got the 3 buildings. I didn't write down the note, but I heard somebody say that they saw 75 units on there. I just want to make sure that that's a legitimate exhibit. before we take this much farther.
Chairman Gray, here is the exhibit, and it does show the unit counts in each building, and it adds up to 70 units that would be allowed there. So to go through it, that first one at the top there has 28 units, 18 studios and 10 one-bedroom units would make up the mix there. Then the building right by it has 22 units, and it's 17 studios and 10 one-bedroom units. And then the bottom one at the bottom there is 20 units, which is 10 studios and 10 one-bedroom units. So again, you do have to reduce the size of the units in order to make that work. And as far as addressing the topography, the reason that's done is, let's see if that, yeah, it looks like it shut off on me a little bit.
Yeah, it did.
There we go. Okay, a little bit better. So the units there do add up to 70. So again, you have to make the units smaller in order to make that work, but that is the alternative development proposal there.
Okay. Yeah, I can see the counts there. And just for kind of level setting this in my head, creation of that exhibit is not new. That was a legacy, part of a legacy proposal.
Chairman Gray, yes, that's correct. So this was the initial development proposal of developing that property to the south when the developer, Senderos, realized that the north parcel could potentially be included and was on the market. That's when discussions with the church ensued and entered into contract with the church, which are currently in escrow to purchase that property if this rezoning were to be approved.
Okay, thank you. A couple other things I like about your proposal, the mountainside setbacks, I think, and as well as the building heights, I think are favorable. Nobody likes to see development, but if there is going to be development, there's some real positives in that. And I think the sight lines off the single-family residences, they're far better than they actually could be. So there's some value there. Detractors, Palisades and Mountainside, obviously, we heard a lot about that again here tonight. Nobody brought up the pool being directly visible off Mountainside, and I suppose with landscape that's going to be accounted for, but the Saturday Pina Colada party might bother me if I was adjacent to that. I wanted to see the civil plan again. I wanted to see those driveway angles up to Mountainside. I know that those were at least indicatively table-topped there, but would have liked to have seen that. And the biggest one for me, I think I'm a supporter of this by and large, but the one thing that I can't get past is it seems between developer, town staff, including engineering, and I'm not an engineer, so this is kind of difficult to say, but I don't think we're giving the traffic patterns the credence that they deserve here. I, like Commissioner Watts, well, hold on. Like Commissioner Watts, I sat there a couple different times for extended periods of time, and it's not good. I don't know if anybody else has thoughts on that, but I don't think that, I think that this scenario is unique in that the data is not going to drive the solution or appropriately address the condition is maybe a better way to say that. So while I say I'm a supporter of this, I'm a supporter of this with the condition that the traffic get down to the stoplight at the church property. That's where I guess that's where I reside as we head into this, looking for a motion or any particular action. So again, commissioners, any final thoughts? And if not, Commissioner Corey.
Thank you, Chair. So, for discussion, I think we definitely heard some themes tonight from 18, I think it was 18 or 17 people that spoke. There was a lot of people in opposition for this, which is reasonable, I think, because this is so close to a residential area. I heard a lot of themes around the traffic, of course, and the views. But like we heard from somebody today, I don't want to go that far down the path if we're just making the recommendation to approve or deny this request. So, I'll say what I said last time around the zoning is a promise that we've made to the residents. And like somebody shared tonight, this should only be changed under extreme circumstances. And I understand what the developer is trying to do and spread this out to lower them and make it seem like it's going to be a better solution for us. But I just don't think that that's the case. And, when this many people show up to let us know their feedback, who live around the area, I think we need to listen to that more importantly. So I will not be voting to approve this tonight.
Commissioner Schlossberg.
Yeah, just a couple observations as well. I used to live on the corner of Lost Hills and Primrose for quite some time, and I'm very familiar with this piece of land. I'm also familiar with, and this is not, excuse me because I'm going to make a comment about Four Peaks condos, but I spent a lot of time gathering balls for my son out of that wash down there at the foot of Lost Hills, and I always thought to myself, I was like, man, that is really unattractive, those condos, the back of the condos over there, the view from the back of the condos at Four Peaks. And that's why I kept asking about the artist rendering, what this is going to look like. Is it going to block that? Because I really find it, I'm looking at it right now on my computer, I find it kind of unattractive. And I always have, but please don't, throw me under the bus for that. But I go back to what Chairman Gray said. Chairman Gray. Chairman Gray.
The bus goes down Ponderosa, too.
But that's right. But so question regarding culverts or whatever, was there really some research done on getting some ingress egress over to Palisades, and is it completely cost prohibitive where it's just not feasible to do it for this project, or what's the?
Chairman Gray, Vice Chair Schlossberg. So yes, a lot of time was spent into looking. We knew that was one of the comments, in addition to some of the other items, of can we bring our main access point so that it's off of Palisades? And the answer to the question, so the first thing that is no. And the reason is, the first thing that we looked at is how can we span the wash to give access in the middle portion of Palisades? That is not possible to do because that is a right turn deceleration lane into the church property. So we'd be conflicting with that, so we can't put it there. So the only place that you can put the shared access would be sharing it with the church property by spanning the entire length of that wash. That would require an incredibly large box culvert with significant impact to the wash, which is infeasible to do for a variety of reasons. The first is it is extremely cost prohibitive to do, but the other part is you heard a lot of comments about how much we need to preserve and protect that wash and the open space and the wildlife that lives in there. The nice thing about this site plan is it does not impact that wash at all. So not only would it be infeasible to do to extend that large of a box culvert, but trying to do that would require significant work to that drainage corridor and cause disturbances to that wash. So it really isn't feasible. But I do want to remind the commission that this is where access comes from will come from Palisades or from Mountainside Drive with any development on these properties. And so again, if the concern is access, I think we've done the very best that we can, excluding access on Palisades, which cannot be done, to address all the comments about the nuances of Mountainside Drive and traffic in this area. And we spent a lot of time to do that. But those nuances don't get addressed at all with a by right development. And so I want to remind the commission of that. But we certainly spent lots of time working to see if it was feasible to do access on Palisades, and it just simply is not.
Are there any napkin sketch exhibits that could be shared that showed how that tie-in with that traffic light may have been studied? Is there any due diligence behind that we could actually take a look at?
Chairman Gray, I am not aware of sketches that were put together. One of the things that goes into it is kind of a drainage analysis, and we're happy if the commission wanted kind of more of a formal analysis on the impacts to drainage and what you would have to do for that large box culvert there. Our team would be happy to put together that work. That said, I will say that You know, we of course we're here in January, and we've since that time, even before January, spent a lot of times on the design of this development, and a lot of effort to build a creatively designed development. And then since January, spent an additional 2 months working hard with city staff on what you see before you to address this. So it hasn't been for a lack of effort. We've put in a lot of work to get to this point where we are, and really do believe that we've addressed all the concerns and comments they've heard to the best that we can. But if there was more work or evidence that the commission needed to see, we could put that together. What that would be in the form of is a drainage analysis and how much it would impact flows and the difficulty you'd have to do that.
Farhad, your thoughts on tying in at that intersection, or maybe town engineer as well? Yeah, he's still here.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, I think that would be better suited for the engineer to answer with regard to the tie-in. I can't make any additional points other than the fact that there's a deceleration lane over there. And
sure, and of course it's
drainage constraints.
probably not fair to ask him without allowing some study of it, right? But just give it your best shot here.
I'll do my best shot. Yes, Mr. Chairman and members of the commission, to come out onto Palisades, the best thing for us is to try to really stay away from the wash if we can. Otherwise, we would need to really take a look at that and size the culvert properly, because obviously, being in a hillside community that we are, stormwater drainage is imperative that we keep that as free-flowing as possible. So if the best, and obviously we know we need to look at the big picture here and what is the best way to move forward. But just from a storm drainage standpoint, the best thing there would be to try to stay away and not even touch that wash and that drainage area. But being as it may, we also have that situation where we do have a decel lane on Palisades. If that wasn't there, that would be more maybe more palatable, perhaps. But we do have a number of issues there that kind of push the primary access to Mountainside, in my opinion.
Chairman Gray, we do have our civil engineer here who can talk about in detail, if you'd like, what they looked into as far as the inability to extend that box culvert, if you would like to hear from him as well.
What about bringing the drive aisle over along and paralleling Palisades down to the traffic light?
Chairman Gray, great question, and this is when I'm going to call up the civil engineer to address more technically the issues.
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, my name is Craig Smith. I'm with KSE Design Group, and we're the civil engineers on the project. We did look, not in great detail, because once we took a look at the right turn lane and deceleration lane on Palisades, that precluded us from actually exiting the property out to Palisades. The other issue is that there's a large structure that's right at the northeast corner of the parcel where the church driveway enters off of Palisades. And that's a detention structure so that the water actually fills up in the area right at that corner and spills into that structure, which goes underneath Palisades Boulevard and continues on. So getting to manage all of that drainage in that area and trying to cross it at the same time really creates more disturbance to that wash than I think anybody here in the town, you and the developer, would like to see. Again, a lot of the character is in that wash and the habitat that's there, as well as just providing that open space. So there are a lot of issues that keep us from trying to get out to Palisades at that location and trying to get through the church parking lot. I guess that would have to be an issue that would be taken up with the church, but I can't see that as being a viable solution either. Again, you'd have to cross the wash to do that. Thank you.
Commissioner Watts.
This may be out in left field. What about taking 30 feet of the property and making Mountainside a 4-lane highway, deeding that 30 feet to the city so that we can mitigate some of the problems by simply having a dedicated turn lane both directions, or you can manage the traffic better?
Chairman Gray, Commissioner Watts, if I understand the question correctly, it's can we dedicate a portion of our frontage along Mountainside Drive to extend that area along Mountainside Drive from 2 lanes to 4 lanes? Is that
All the way out to Palisades, yes.
all the way out? So, and I can tell you, the way that this has been designed, we have it, we have the space in between our street and the building. Now, a lot of work would be needed, and of course, you'd have, I'm not sure exactly what traffic issues you'd have with a portion that's 4 lanes and then moving down into 2 eventually on Mountainside, and that might create other issues. So while it's, I do think it's maybe possible that we could dedicate a portion of it and improve it, but you'd have that odd condition where you have 4 lanes and going back down to 2, which could create other issues as well. That said, again, the intent of this developer and development group is to hear the concerns and find solutions, and this is not one that our traffic engineer viewed as something that needed to be done, but that said, if that was something that the planning commission thought would be a benefit, we'd be happy to accommodate.
How about our engineer?
So, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, members of the commission, it may be possible to widen Mountainside as you approach Palisades. We just have to be careful if we do encroach into that right turn lane at Palisades, to see what the required length of that dedicated right turn lane was. But it might be possible, certainly, to widen. You see that at quite a number of intersections anyway, widening to add a dedicated right turn lane or dedicated left turn lane. That is quite possible, and it's something we can look at with the developer and the engineer.
Yeah, thank you.
So we're talking, just make sure my head's straight, we're talking about this is all theoretical here, right? But we're talking about developer conceding the 15 feet or so at the northwest corner of the parcel to allow for a right out on the Palisades?
Well, that's not what I said. What I said was from the corner of the south parcel, give me 30 feet of land so that we can widen that to a 4-lane highway all the way out to Palisades.
Why do you want to go that far?
Just to give people the opportunity. If you came out from below, you're going to relieve some of the traffic. You're going to relieve traffic feeding into those. You're going to take away the opportunity or the desire for people to move into the adjoining streets.
What happens to the sidewalk? What happens to the wash that's there?
That's his issue.
Commissioner Dempster.
What about, building on that, again, hypothetically, the parcel that the town owns to the west that has the Lost Hills sign on that, is that enough space to at least widen the entrance to Mountainside?
So, Mr. Chairman and Commissioner, my thoughts was, the town does own that property, and we can certainly see what would work best there. We'd work with the developer. I am still a staunch advocate of looking at that wall. It's not a retaining wall so much, it's more of a decorative wall. It is, I think, a major part of the issue of making that left turn there. Of course, there is the crest vertical curve that is also, nothing we can do can change that. But certainly, we can increase the line of sight and get much better line of sight if we do something with that. And if we are able to expand, I guess that kind of make a dedicated right turn lane, or along their frontage at Palisades, we can move over some of those cars, especially maybe the left turning vehicle, to again even more increase that line of sight. So I think there are some things that we can look at the intersection.
Chairman Gray, if I may, so that suggestion that was just mentioned was actually ironically also what we were discussing over there with our traffic engineer, is I think what might be a good solution here is to take our north driveway and widen it all the way across the frontage, and we can make that a dedicated right turn lane onto Palisades. And I think that resolves a lot of the concerns that were just suggested, I think is a feasible solution. And so if the commission would like to see that, we'd be happy to include a stipulation that requires the developer to make that improvement.
And then, so I appreciate that, but in complementary to that, what I just chicken scratched up here was, and this is hypothetical, but with town participation, getting another 15 feet out of the west side of Mountainside, that would free up enough space center street for a decel turn island, which would then allow for free-flowing traffic north, free-flowing traffic south. You've got your turn lane that's right out on the Palisades. To me, that's a solution, a potential solution to what's hidden in the nuances of this particular location.
Chairman Gray, thank you. Yeah, so that of course is the town's property, so we can't force the town to allow us to make those improvements, but of course we have everyone in this room that would be needed to make that decision, and so we again would be happy to make the improvement to the town's property if they would allow us to do so.
Commissioner Watts, your thoughts?
Yeah, I would kind of recant.
Microphone.
That was first year. Rethinking the south entrance, you wouldn't need to go all the way to the end of the property line, but I still am more of a proponent for slowing down traffic just by its nature. If you don't have people jockeying for positions, if you've got two lanes going both directions. So I would be still a proponent of taking 30 feet, making an additional 2 lanes, 2 north, 2 south, incorporating one of those lanes as it approaches Palisades to the left side.
Folks.
So that's it.
Okay.
That land is not for sale. You guys approached the church to buy it. Yes, that land is
Joe.
not for sale. I apologize.
Thank you.
This is just so wrong.
We understand the emotions behind this. A lot of us have been in similar situations in town. In fact, that's how half of us got up here, was these types of scenarios. So we do appreciate where you guys come from. We're trying to find a solution that suits all interests.
Don't change the zoning. Don't do it for the town, not for these people. We all know where it was zoned for what it is. Now you're gonna change it?
Commissioner Watts.
It doesn't sound like there's a lot of room for negotiating to try to get a resolution to this, and frankly, I resent some of the comments. So whether or not you believe that I'm trying to work in your best interest or not, to me is irrelevant. I don't really care. I am here to try and get the best solution for the town, for the people that have spoken against it. Something is going to go in. That's what you got to deal with. Something is going to go in the R4. I am not looking for feedback. With that, I'm done.
Thank you, Commissioner Watts. Folks, please. Commissioners, any other thoughts? Commissioner DePauw? No. Commissioner Corey? No. Commissioner Dempster? Commissioner Kovacevic? Commissioner Schlossberg? Okay. All right. No more comments? Paula?
No, Chairman.
Commissioners, a motion?
I would make a motion to deny the rezone for the 3.1 acres of the 6.83 acre property from the R110 single-family residential to R3 multifamily residential.
Commissioners, is there a second to Commissioner Corey's motion? Going once? Twice? Motion fails. Commissioners, an alternate motion? Okay. I will go ahead and put a motion here on the table, open to any amendments that the commission might have. I am going to recommend a motion I'm going to recommend a motion be carried to the town council to approve the rezone with all of the stated stipulations and an added stipulation to modify step 1A to include a statement of less than 24 units per building, and with a very, very strong caveat that the parking solution between Mountainside and Palisade, not the parking, the traffic solution between Mountainside and Palisades in a collaborative effort between the town and the developer be ironclad. I really, really want the traffic down at that stoplight. And if it's not going to get down at that stoplight, the solution at Mountainside has to be perfect. And without that perfect solution, I would hope that the town council would not take our recommendation forward. So, commissioners, any amendments to that motion?
Is it less than or equal to 24 units?
Yeah, that's the upper limit of the existing building.
Okay.
Commissioners, a second?
I'll second it.
Commissioner Kovacevic seconds the motion. Last call for amendments. Paula, roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Corey,
No.
Commissioner DePaul,
Yay.
Commissioner Dempster,
Aye.
Commissioner Kovacevic,
Aye.
Commissioner Watts,
No.
Vice Chairman Schlossberg,
Aye.
Chairman Gray,
Aye.
5-2.
Thank you, Paula. Okay. Commissioners, 5-minute recess, or we want to move on with the agenda? Take a 5-minute recess, please. Thank you. Was that criteria that you selected by, or? All right, so we're going to jumble up our agenda here. So, John, let's go ahead and move to 9A, to provide comments on the architectural design for 15,006 North Ivory.
Okay, Chairman, Commissioners, try not to take too much time here, go through a quick presentation, and then let Mr. Gerzak come up and visit with you about some of his thoughts and his needs with regard to this project. But just a quick background, back May and June of last year, you reviewed and then ultimately recommended approval of a special use permit for building of a office multifamily project at Ivory and El Pueblo. There was discussion during the meeting about the architecture and its need to be reviewed closely through the site plan review. That did then go to council and was approved ultimately in September 2022. Again, discussions included some concern with the proposed architecture, desire to see the building relate to the context, but there were no stipulations specifically placed on the approvals by either the P&Z or council. In Chapter 19 of the zoning ordinance, Section 1904H talks about infill and has the guideline that we look for compatible infill without duplicating outdated architectural styles. And so we've been working at this, talking with the applicant through the site plan review process. We're just about to the final stages of approving the site plan. Needs to get his building permits submitted soon. And so normally by the procedures, we would have actually denied the request and there'd be an appeal. Well, if we would have gone through that process, he wouldn't have been able to get to you till your next meeting, and he's anxious to move forward. So I didn't want to do that. So this is a little bit kind of out of the normal sequence to go ahead and get some input here so that we can then move forward with hopefully finalizing the site plan. So here are the elevations of the proposed buildings. Again, they're not too different from what you saw previously. He's been consistent with that. Here are some of the buildings in the area to the west across the parking lot, and then to the southwest, the old charter school homes immediately across Ivory from his corner lot. Here are some other buildings in town close by here on El Lago and Gunsight, and the one that we're reviewing for Dan Kaufman down on Saguaro. A more modern look, similar to what Mr. Gerzak's proposing on his site, similar colors to what he's proposing there. And then here's a home that I believe he's built here in town using those colors and those materials to show how they can look in actual construction. Very nice looking building. And so we're not really looking for any formal action by the commission, but an opportunity for myself in particular and Mr. Gerzak to get your thoughts on the proposal and whether or not you feel the design is addressing the code requirement to be something that's compatible with the neighborhood. Staff feels that it's not meeting that goal. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here. It's partially the colors, partially the shape and materials that are being proposed. I'm not an architect to say what to design differently necessarily, but again, when we look at what is adjacent to it in this context, staff's not finding that being compatible. So with that, I'll turn it back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, John. Mr. Gerzak, do you have any inclination to?
Yes, we covered everything pretty well.
Okay.
So I did kind of tone down the color palette, make it more neutral, compatible, and that kind of stuff. And I feel it's pretty. It's gonna blend pretty well actually in that area. the main color is it's pigeon gray. I mean, we've used it in, 4 different HOAs, have approved it in that. So it's, something that's been built in town, pretty frequently by myself in the last couple of years. So
Is there, within the development there, and I remember that parcel's in some sort of master HOA, some sort of master development?
yeah, there's like a commercial owners association.
Have they commented on the elevations at this point?
I mean, I haven't formally submitted it to them, but I mean, there was the previous elevation with the other colors, didn't seem like we were having any issues with the actual architectural style. Maybe just the color palette previously with the, white and blue tones.
The more flat-lined architecture lends itself to the lighter color scheme.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and, I have these pop-outs on there, because it's kind of going to be, bigger kind of wall planes, to kind of break it apart a little bit too. Having a different color also, helps break those wall planes down.
Commissioner Corey?
Yeah, so, I think it's a kind of a controversial topic too, whether we keep what the existing styles are or we kind of modernize the town a little bit. And I don't know where everybody kind of stands on that, but I'm definitely on the side where we start to make things look a little bit more modern, and I actually really like this design. I think the best way to enhance this would be to include more landscaping. But I like the simplicity, I like the style.
Yeah, on the elevations,
I see some trees in gray, I'm sure.
The landscaping that's gonna be on there.
Yeah.
Those are just kind of just placements right now.
So you have a unique, a unique design here because you've got commercial on the first floor and residential on the top. So you want to try to make it blend with the both. And I'd say the more you can make it look residential than commercial, probably the better. I see that you've got a variety of things in here. It's not just flat walls and windows. So I'm seeing a lot going on, which is great. And then I would just stay away from the colors that aren't neutral or natural.
Yeah, kind of like the other
like
parks that were recently
reds or greens that we've seen in the past or that we see today.
Yeah.
But I think that it looks good, and you showed a few designs of buildings around the area, and they could probably use a makeover. So I tend to like this style, and I think it looks good.
Commissioner Dempster?
Thank you. I agree with Commissioner Corey. I do like the design, and I don't think we should go backwards and match when something hasn't been updated in over 20 years. It's very heavy, and I do think this would blend well and freshen up that area that is a little tired looking over there. And it does need a little bit of facelift, so I think this is wonderful. Thank you for your work.
Commissioner Watts?
I'm almost afraid to make a comment.
Tough crowd today.
Yeah, heck with it. I too like it. I agree with Commissioner Dempster that, the surrounding area is kind of old and staunchy. But I am curious, and this is probably for Farhad or John, about, isn't there a color palette or some reflectivity measurement that has to be adhered to in building codes so that these have to be compliant with what is already existing? And that's why I'd be curious, if they do, why was it rejected by the building department?
Yeah, actually, the LRV on this one, I believe, was 45, and this is actually the brightest color that they allow in Fire Rock, for the LRV.
Well, not to be argumentative, but that's Fire Rock, and we're Fountain Hills, so.
Yeah, but usually, even this
Yeah.
color, like, they weren't approving previously, colors this bright, and then in the last few years, it's changed.
So, John, what's the official word? What's the values that we look at, and is it complying with that? Is that why it was declined?
So I don't know about anything in the building code.
Okay.
In the zoning ordinance, section 1906, which is color materials, and just has some very general guidance on this. Choose colors that relate well to one another and surroundings. Down here it says, avoid highly reflective materials, including colors. Later discourages dark colors. So we don't really have a specific, as I think you were talking about.
Is that regulated mainly by the Property Owners Association or the HOAs?
So it's in the zoning ordinance.
It is in the in zoning, because I know the Neighborhood Property Owners Association has specific values and they won't let certain things.
Some do, right.
Same thing.
But yeah, I don't think so. It's pretty,
Doesn't have the same
pretty
thing.
general here as far as I know.
What was the grounds then that was declined by staff?
Again, it hasn't been declined, but when we were here at for the special use permit hearing, we had similar elevations. There was some concern from the neighbors. I heard concern from the commissioners, and I was having some concern personally, too, with considering this to be compatible infill, because it is so dramatically different than what's there. And so when it hadn't changed any based on those previous concerns, I wanted to come back and get some feedback from this group. If you're fine with it, then that's fine. We'll go ahead and finish our review.
Thank you.
I generally concur with the other commissioners. I tend to like it. I did not like the Park Place elevations that Commissioner Corey was alluding to, but I tend to like this. I think it's risky to go into that enclave there and be the new anchor, but if you're going to go bold, then go bold, and let's hope the rest of it comes along with you over the next decade. So.
Yeah, and I mean, I do have plans to, try to get some of those other parcels in there and kind of redevelop, different buildings on there and that. So, I mean, if and when that would be, done or proposed, then, kind of make it so, anything new built in there would kind of be the same color scheme, so it all looks uniform.
Yeah, and I also appreciate Commissioner Corey's statement on the landscape. I realize these are just naked elevations here, but
yeah,
that architecture.
Yeah, there's not too much room for landscape, just because it's, we're pretty close to setbacks and that. But
but just a couple strategically placed, larger boxes would really set that building off. So I appreciate it. I like it. Commissioners, any other? Commissioner Kovacevic?
I'm the last person you want commenting on colors.
We need to get the wheel out for you? Okay.
I don't need a motion necessarily.
Just general direction, feedback?
General direction. I've heard
Okay.
support for it, so that's good.
Anything else, commissioners? Oh, yeah, sorry. We do have a public hearing. Paula, speaker cards?
Ed Stizza.
Good evening again. So I've got a couple comments here. This is the perfect time to bring this up. I've talked to John about this before. Our painting ordinance, you did not talk about desert colors, okay? I'm not even sure I want to debate on the architecture of this, okay? It does not blend. But that being said, you can also blend with colors, okay? So if everybody likes the actual architecture of this and you feel it's going to change the direction of that area, I get it. But the colors are a problem, okay? When you have black accents, it's happening all over town. John brought a beautiful example up. The apartments, which I think Mr. Gerzak was part of, I think, down at the Black, which, which stuff, what's the name of that development? Gunsight. So Black. Those were mine, those were somebody else. Oh, were they? Okay. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to misspeak, but anyway, it's the same type of thing. Those are black. They're black, okay? So when we look at black in the desert, it is not conducive. It doesn't hold up. They fade. Look at the Luna Apartments. Look at every single painting project in town that is black, okay? So now, this has black trim, but eventually, this is black, correct?
The accents, yeah.
Yes. So these black accents are very contrasty. That does not blend with the town, nor does it blend with the ordinance. Am I correct? It did say desert colors, correct? Okay, so at this point in time, I really think this is a valid argument. We've been talking about aesthetic, we've been talking about architecture here. This thing looks like something that should be based on those colors down by the beach at Huntington. So I don't think we're in the right line with the color patterns.
So the ordinance says discourage exterior finishes. It says dark colors except where appropriately utilized on trim.
How do you fight it? I mean, everything's so vague. I think those apartments down there look horrible. And this is one of the things I do for a living. And I can tell you right now, the black that is on those gun site apartments is going to deteriorate faster than any other color. I don't care how well they painted it. So we're going down this path that we're going to have all black, white, and, or I should say gray, black with white stripes, as we do with our storage unit now behind Desert Vista. I ask you all to take a look at that building. That's horrifying.
Thanks, Ed. Commissioner Corey.
Yeah, so I think the point that he brings up is that the black is hard to maintain because it will get faded by the sun. And someone who's speaking, I am in an NPOA personally, and I think I chose the darkest color they would allow me to paint my house. So I get that the dark colors are helpful sometimes, but would you, I imagine you would have a plan to make sure that the colors stay consistent and maintain them regularly?
So the color lasts, quite a while.
You said it's integral?
Oh, it's
Synthetic stuff.
Synthetic stuff. What is synthetic stucco?
Oh, it's built into the, okay, thank you.
You need to go home. Okay, commissioners, final comments? Good?
Well, I think there's also preventative maintenance, right? When you're talking
You would
about.
say that.
I mean, and I think we discussed that before, prior, about just keeping things up. So, what, in the desert every few years, I just painted my home, repainted my home. I mean, it can be maintained and kept fresh looking.
Well, there you have it. That's the end of that. All right. Enough confusing feedback, John? Thank you. All right, let's close the public hearing, and let's move up to agenda item fine. Let's go to agenda item 4, consideration and possible action to approve the regular meeting minutes of the Planning and Zoning Commission from February 13th.
Don't we have to give some direction to staff about whether we approve it or not, or?
It's too late now.
It's done?
It's over.
Oh, the minutes are just saying we did it?
Yeah.
I didn't hear myself say that, so I'm curious.
Happy birthday, guys.
Oh, okay. Sorry. It's been a long night.
Too late.
So this is for the minutes?
Yes. this is
Okay,
for
I'll
the
make a
minutes.
motion to approve the minutes
Thank you.
from our February meeting.
I second that.
In favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Sorry, John. I said we were going to go 2.5 hours tonight, and I'm just 9 minutes short of 3, so. We'll move to agenda item 6, public hearing and consideration possible action to amend the zoning ordinance, chapter 6, signage regulations. John, on this one, I'd like to do short presentation, public comment, and then probably going to look for a motion because all my notes are here, and it said I've had enough. So So, presentation?
So, yes, Chair, with that direction, I will probably just hit the first couple of slides to set the background and then leave the rest for a future presentation. But as we know, the Town Council has had some questions, concerns, comments about our current sign code, some areas they think don't work well that cause some problems for our businesses. And so they've asked the Staff and Planning Commission to take a look at some possible amendments. They have, at their recent retreat, provided staff some initial comments that they have in areas where they believe some improvements could be made. As staff then has been going through the code, we've identified a few things, given our experience implementing the code over the last couple of years. We think a couple of tweaks would be beneficial that we also want to bring up. And this has been advertised tonight and future meetings as we continue this as public hearings. So you and the public have opportunity also where you might see any need for improvements beyond what the commission or the council has suggested to direct staff in making modifications to an actual ordinance to bring to the commission for recommendation then on to the town council. So that's kind of what we are about. And so from here I start getting into specifics of the ordinance. So I think I'll just stop there for this evening, see what public comments you may have and what direction you want to give after that.
Very good. Paula, do we have any speaker cards?
Yes, Chairman. One, Jean Slugta.
Sorry, Jean.
Chairman and Commissioners, first of all, I want to thank this commission. I've been so impressed with all of you for your dedication, your volunteerism, and your thoughtfulness. I was very impressed, and of course, always the town staff. As a former town planner and P&Z commissioner, I really appreciate what I've seen tonight and other nights on the TV screen. But anyways, now, on the sign ordinance, old and current changes, there's much not that I like. But my concerns really are threefold. One, the town's single greatest asset, and what brought me here 27 years ago, is its unequal beauty. And being so close to one of the largest metropolitan areas in the country, it's astounding. Misdirected attempt to serve a tiny part of our business community can only serve to damage that beauty. Second item is safety. Temporary signs, A-frames and T-frame, etc., should only be used in walkable areas where a person can actually read them. Going down Shea at 50 miles an hour can only create dangerous driving conditions, which I'm sure you've already talked about, when someone's trying to read a 6-square-foot sign. Even Saguaro Boulevard creates risk at 40 miles an hour. Add to driving risk a sign blown into Shea Boulevard or Saguaro at nighttime or even daytime. Also, be careful with the ADA stuff and senior concerns in general. When you allow temporary signs too close to the curb, especially in the downtown diagonal parking area, you risk handicapped people having difficulty getting onto the curb when they try to step up. Also consider the car bumpers that typically extend over the curb onto the sidewalk. Thirdly, property values. Certainly a community flooded with low-cost temporary signs on every arterial has a negative impact on property values. We need to be vigilant about that. What could be the impact on our property values? Is it $10,000? $50,000? Maybe $100,000? It's hard to say. One council member claimed last year that the temporary sign had a 40% impact on business. Well, I say that's nonsense. A dozen years ago or more, the town changed the ordinance to require businesses to take in those signs at the end of the day. I found a huge number stopped putting out their signs altogether, period. Doesn't sound like a 40% impact to me. So I only ask that as you deliberate, you serve the 24,000 residents as well as business. Just read the very first sentence of the sign ordinance, which in part says, promote the general welfare by creating a more aesthetically appealing community. Thank you.
Thank you, Gene.
So unless you have anything else that you'd like to hear from me this evening, I would suggest the if you could just move to continue this to your April meeting, as well as then the other two items on your agenda. That way we don't have to renotice them.
Yeah, that sounds palatable to me. So I'll go ahead and make the motion to table the balance of of tonight's agenda. So that would be items 7, 8, 10, and 11 to our April meeting.
Yes.
Commissioners, a second.
I'll sorry, comment?
Comments to staff, will that be included?
Okay, I'll throw 9 in as well, although that'll be re-agendized anyway.
I'll second the motion.
In favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. We are adjourned. Thank you.